We've missed your microphone tonight. I'm going to be through FM radio.
You have read.
Sure, let's keep it short.
Hi, David, it's Mike. How are you? We're about to start, so you're and there's a microphone issue, so we might be passing one around. But, sorry. All right. With that, we're ready on the camera? All right. We're going to call this meeting of the Board of Education order. If you could please rise for the pledge of allegiance or the flags. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The next item is the approval of the meeting agenda. I have a motion to approve the meeting agenda. Dr. Francis, is there a second? Ms. Dayton? Mr. Chair? It's not working.
I wanted to move that we take item, which item is it? Item 7A, which is action item on policy, and remove that from action and move it to discussion. Does everyone know why?
Well, if there's a second for it, we can understand. There's a second for Ms. Reagan. Okay.
If I have my dates right, maybe I don't, someone can correct me. If I have my dates right, this is the last regular meeting of this board of 8 members. 3 members of this board are most definitely leaving this board after this, one more meeting after this, but this is the last regular meeting. There may be 4 members that are leaving. And I just think it's incredibly bad practice for when you have potentially half the board moving out, those boards voting to make major policy changes. In some areas, these are pretty major, when they won't even be here and they're not accountable for that. I think these are decisions that should be deferred to the board that is about to be elected by the public. So I think it's helpful to harness the policy knowledge of the members of the board who have history, but as a matter of practice, for board members to be voting on major policy decisions when they're going right out the door immediately afterwards and not accountable to the public, I just think is very bad practice, and I think it reflects very badly on good governance practice of the board. So that's why I'm making that motion.
Discussion?
I guess I would tend to leave it in the spot because we are not in any way required to actually approve them, and we could take them individually if there's particular ones that are more problematic. So I would tend to suggest we leave as is.
I would also add past practice. We have voted on action items prior to new boards being seated. In fact, this board will be the board that takes up the budget discussion for the first time, and yet the newly elected board will be the ones voting on it. I don't see why we would change that practice, and I certainly understand where Dr. Francis is coming from. If there are certain things in here that are problematic, we can take them up at that point. I would also note that we have actually had these up as discussion items before, some of these more than one time. So I think it's time we have to take them up tonight. Any further discussion? Statement.
We've been voting on policy in the last 6 months that you could say the same thing about. So I don't think the logic of the argument holds. We're still accountable.
Anybody else before we pass by?
So I think this board is probably more knowledgeable about policy than the new board. The new board has a steep learning curve to mount when they come in, so I think this board has the background in which to be able to make an intelligent decision.
I just want to clarify, I went back and looked at the last 4 boards in this meeting and the meeting prior. As a matter of precedent, I want to correct Mr. Bernstein. There is not a situation where we have approved policy changes that fundamentally change how the district operates. In some cases, there have been. So I think when we say action items, of course there are situations where we take up action items because the board needs to move along. Policy changes live on forever until change. So I'm not aware of a situation where we've done this before, so the implication that there's actually precedent for this is false.
Any further discussion? All those in favor of moving item 7A from action to discussion, raise your hand. 1, 2. All those against? Ms. Olson?
Again.
That motion fails 2-6. All right, so before us is the motion to approve the meeting agenda. Any further discussion? All those in favor of approving the meeting agenda? Ms. Olson?
Aye.
All those against? Okay, that passes 6-2. Thank you. All right, so the first item to come before us right now is the consent agenda. Can we have a motion to accept the consent agenda? Ms. Dayton, is there a second? Ms. O'Neill, any discussion? All those in favor of accepting the consent agenda?
Aye.
All those opposed? All abstaining? Passes 7-1. Thank you. All right, next up is our school welcome, Mr. Goldstein. I'm going to borrow my microphone. No, you need it for... There you go.
Good evening, Chairman Bernstein, members of the Board of Education, Superintendent Jones, members of Cabinet, colleagues, parents, and students. I'm proud to have this opportunity to serve as host of this evening's Board of Education meeting and to share with you some of the progress that Eastern is making relative to the district's strategic plan. Building on our progress from last year, the Eastern staff has anchored our work in the vision of the graduate. Maintaining a focus on these learner capacities has improved our decision-making process and ensures that everything we do is in service to student growth. Members of Eastern staff have taken part in professional learning experiences that have enhanced instructional practice through the educational conditions we now create. We have been increasing the personalization of learning in many ways, through problem-based learning frameworks, interdisciplinary projects, and increased student ownership in their educational experience. We're seeing increased opportunities for students to engage deeply with the curriculum. Through these units and lessons, students are exploring complex and authentic problems, posing meaningful questions, evaluating information, and generating creative ideas and products. Beyond the academic areas outlined in the vision of the graduate, the Eastern Middle School experience is also focused on developing the personal and interpersonal capacities in all students. Our framework for positive interventions work proactively to teach our students how to be ethical and responsible members of the community. At least once per week, every grade uses their advisor-based time to teach a social-emotional lesson that emphasizes caring for self and others. Furthermore, we recognize the importance of developing resilient and reflective learners and have started to highlight how to accept mistakes as part of the learning process and what it takes to overcome obstacles that stand in the way of us achieving our personal goals. Instilling a growth mindset in all EMS students is integral to our mission to prepare every child for his or her respective future in an independent global community. The interpersonal skills that are required in today's world are taught and practiced across all school settings. Students are instructed in the ways of effective communication and how to collaborate with others to enhance not only the learning experience, but their life experiences and that of others around them. Finally, we are extremely proud of our students' achievement. The academic rigor and hard work of students and staff is clearly visible as one looks at student performance data on the Smarter Balanced Assessment. In both math and ELA, between 80 and 90% of Eastern Middle School students across grades 6 through 8 score a 3 or above. Even more significant has been the growth and improvement of students. For example, what might not be as visible on normal data sets would be looking at students with a low 3 to a much higher score within the 3 area of scoring. While this may be something to celebrate, SBA data is but one measure of growth and achievement of our students. I invite you to join us here at Eastern for our winter theatrical performance, athletic competitions, one of our many music concerts, or art exhibitions to see, hear, and experience the many ways in which our students are developing and demonstrating the capacities of the vision of the graduate. As you can see, Eastern is a hub of activity and making notable progress in our journey to bring the vision of the graduate to life for our students, to providing an authentic and meaningful education. While there will always be more work to do, I'm extremely proud of our accomplishments to date and look forward to our continued journey to create a positive, nurturing, and collaborative environment where all members feel connected and valued. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we're going to move on to our public hearing. First up is our GHS student government.
Thank you for the introduction. Thank you to the whole board, the cabinet, Dr. Jones, and Mr. Mayo. Hello, everyone. I'm Lucas Gazianis. I'm the senior class president at Greenwich High School. So first of all, before I begin, next month is election day, and this is the last time that I'll be addressing this exact Board of Education. So thank you to all of you for serving the town and its students, and good luck to everybody who's running for re-election. Now I'll begin with a recap of Homecoming Week, which was last week at the high school. We had some exciting themes and a lot of students got involved. Last Monday was Pajama Day, Tuesday was Decades Day, Wednesday was Yom Kippur, which is a holiday and not a theme. Thursday was Classic Senior Dress-Up Day, where I went as a farmer and Zane had the excuse to wear a bathrobe to school, and Friday was USA Day. Seniors were, of course, the most involved class, but I still saw plenty of underclassmen showing their spirit. The game on Saturday was obviously a blowout win for Greenwich, and there was decent turnout for the parade that morning, which was a lot of fun. But on to the next senior class event. We released Sro Chair Applications this week, and by next month we will have selected both of our overall chairs and all 12 of our other chairs. This year the show will take place on Thursday, March 5th and Friday, March 6th, so mark that in your calendars and make sure to come support the class of 2020. In terms of the rest of student government, we are already seeing a ton of potential in our new idea of subcommittees. Just this week at our monthly mass meeting, we explained the entire process in detail to our reps and then shared a document with them in case they already had any ideas. I'm very pleased to report that the number of subcommittees that have already been signed up in the past few days far exceeded our expectations, and it's already clear that our reps are going to be taking full advantage of this new opportunity. Some of the subcommittees we've seen that have already gained traction are Zane and Junior Class President Mark Chen's initiative to limit testing right before midterms, Subcommittee on creating designated pickup and drop-off spots for Uber and Lyft drivers, and a group aimed at educating the rest of the GHS community about LGBTQ+ issues. I actually just started a subcommittee with the intent of implementing ranked choice voting in school elections, which is an alternative voting system aimed at helping third-party and moderate candidates. Through ranking, it also ensures that the winner receives a majority of votes. Obviously, there aren't parties in class elections at GHS, but by moving GHS in line with new efforts to make voting a more fair process, we can lead the way for larger governing bodies. So great things are in store for us this year, and I'm excited to share how all of these subcommittees play out. So thank you for your attention, and with that, please welcome our student body president, Zane Cotter.
Thank you, Lucas. Mr. Chairman, Dr. Jones, members of the board, administrators, parents, cabinet, and renowned citizens of Greenwich, good evening and welcome. I am Zane Cotter, the student body president of Greenwich High School. And I want to begin by recognizing our outgoing Board of Education members, Ms. Dayton, Ms. O'Neill, Ms. Rabin, and thanking them for their service as members of the board. Ms. Rabin, you specifically have been a friend to me for the past several years as part of your work as the board's liaison to student government, and I am proud to have learned a great deal about kindness, respect, and perspective from you. I hope the whole selectman thing works out, because I could not truly imagine a town of Greenwich without you at the helm somewhere on some board. I wish you all the best of luck in all your future endeavors. My, do they grow up so fast. Lucas and I noticed that the board would be talking about phase 1 of the Cardinal Field project tonight, and I understand that the budget for phase 1 given by the BET will likely force a deficit. I would just ask that the Board of Education focuses on optimizing costs for what is necessary, and if the result is a deficit, that they have confidence in the community's ability to contribute towards making up that deficit. Now, I've lived in multiple towns, and I have never seen a community so passionate and inclusive as this one, or as a matter of fact, a community so involved with its high school. The people of Greenwich want this stadium completed as much as the Board of Education does. And so if that means a crowdfunding fundraiser here and there to make it happen so as to not run a deficit or delay the project, then I am confident that this community would be open to such an option as a means to be involved with the construction of this new stadium. In light of college night, the PSAT yesterday, and my college interview tomorrow, fingers crossed for that one, by the way, I wanted to briefly talk about the college process and its impact on students. Now, believe me when I say there is no anxiety quite like the anxiety of students who did not start thinking about college early enough and have been slammed into reality by senior year. It often isn't until students start thinking about college and about their goals and dreams that they hold themselves to a higher standard. But many students haven't taken the time to really look deep within themselves to figure out what they aspire to achieve. And so, when faced with difficulty and stress, these students are often the first ones to shut down, to lower their expectations, and to resort to ungodly things because no goal exists to keep them grounded and anchored to the right path. I've seen this happen before, and I'm sure some parents have too. And so I would advise the parents to talk to your children about their goals as early as freshman year so that they gain the ability to push themselves independently, and that you assure them that it's better to have a dream that can change in the future than no dream at all. A good vision is the foundation for success, and I solemnly believe that all students in this district with the right ambition are capable of achieving the highest degree of greatness. As is my senior quote, ambition is vision. Thank you.
And so our next speaker would normally be Carol Sutton from the GEA. She and her family sustained a lot of property damage in the storm last night, so she won't be joining us. Our thoughts go out to her. Carol, hi on the video. You're going to watch it. And we miss you. Next up is PTA Council. Cricket Diamond.
Good evening, Superintendent Jones, Chairman Bernstein, Principal Goldstein, members of the board, cabinet, parents, teachers, and community. My name is Cricket Diamond, and I am the president of PTA Council, and I'm thankful we are all able to be here this evening after the bomb cyclone. My, that was some wind. Thank you for continuing to keep our staff and students' safety at the forefront of every decision and for calling for a 2-hour delay. We have all heard the expression, build it and they will come, and we want to acknowledge and celebrate the fact that New Leb has exceeded attendance projections in every grade and is now home to 300 students. Woohoo! And in the good news category, Council wants to congratulate Amy Barrett and Charlotte Halsey, two GHS seniors who started the Period Project, which advocates for feminine products to be available for girls in schools so they will not have to miss class if they don't have the supplies they need. Connecticut PTA featured the girls this month in their board meeting and announced support for the project. I would like to thank everyone who came out for the Board of Education Candidate Forum on Tuesday night at Central Middle School. We held the event in partnership with the League of Women Voters, with all 5 of the candidates participating. While PTEC and all of our member PTAs are 501c3 organizations and cannot endorse any candidate or party, we do take our role seriously in educating parents on the issues and topics being discussed. This forum gave residents a chance to hear the candidates talk about their positions on many school-related issues. The questions came from our PTAs and committees and focused on the issues that are important to voters. It is clear from the candidates' responses that there is room for improvement. Topics included achievement, the strategic plan, screen time, special education, turnover in administration, facilities, transparency, and equity. If you missed the forum, you can find it on the GCTV website. I also want to update you on the great things happening in our PTAs and committees. Cascade PTA hosted a fun run fundraiser, while Hamilton Avenue had a multicultural evening event for families last week. This week, Old Greenwich School will be celebrating its 49th annual Pumpkin Patch. Parkway PTA is also hosting a fundraiser called Parktoberfest, and Glenville's Harvest Party is Saturday as well. The GHS fundraiser Paint the Town Red at Richards takes place next Friday. And of course, with Halloween coming, there will be loads of fun events like the Monster Mash and Boo Bashes, and those precious events are stamped in my memory and make me wonder where all the years have gone. There is no question that there are many volunteers working feverishly to make a positive difference in our schools. And lest you think the PTAs have all the action, the Academic Excellence Committee, to just name one, has had 2 recent workshops with Irene Parisi and Ann Carabillo. We are grateful for the information and significant improvements they have made to GPS website. 2 thumbs up to all who work to improve access to curriculum for parents. The committee will be providing feedback on the content, both present and desired. If you have not done so already, be sure to check out the website and explore the new content. With respect to the academic quarterly report, we appreciate the effort to update curriculum and provide differentiated materials for every level of learner. Parents have continually expressed interest in knowing the research that underpins curriculum changes and the grade level standards. They want to learn more about the how and why of the humanities and other areas of curriculum in order to support student learning at home, which is why reports like the one you will be discussing tonight are an invaluable tool for both the district and parents. Regarding Cardinal Stadium, we look forward to the discussion tonight. Council has consistently advocated for restrooms, changing facilities, and ADA accessibility for the stadium, bleachers, and press box. We are also advocating for a secondary egress and exit to the GHS campus, which will improve traffic flow, increase security, and life safety for students and surrounding neighbors. As you know, Cardinal Stadium is used for more than just for sports. It's, for example, every student will walk the field and graduate there. Turning to the policy items on the agenda tonight, we note that transportation is both an action item and a discussion item. As student safety is always a concern, we hope you will ensure that each bus stop has a safe way for students to get there, as well as a safe spot for them to stand while waiting. Speaking of safety, Council is pleased to see a policy on data security, as parents want to know that their children's data is secure. Knowing the Board of Education understands the importance of protecting personal information, and the administration will take reasonable security measures to guard against foreseeable loss or exposure of restricted personal information about staff, students, and parents is reassuring to the parents. We are pleased to see that there will be a policy which aims to provide nutritionally balanced and attractive lunches available to all students with sufficient time allowed for eating. As you recall from last year, this was an impassioned plea from parents. We received feedback that lunch lines are long, which does not allow sufficient time for students to both purchase and eat their lunch. This needs to be addressed. It remains a priority of Council to advocate for improved school nutrition standards, guidelines, and programs that ensure all students have access to nutritious meals while in school. Council notes that the core values adopted by the School Lunch Fund Committee and PTAC hope that it gets built into the revised policy. And we thank you for the hard work that this board, administration, and all of our teachers and staff do every day. We appreciate your focus on making sure that each student has the resources they need to pursue their passion and to positively contribute to our world. Thank you.
All right, I'll try to be loud and move the microphone there. Next up are our community comments. Speakers are limited to 3 minutes. We would ask that you respect the 3 minutes. We do have items on our agenda. Oh, look, we have a second microphone. Awesome. All right. Per our policy, we ask that you be respectful, nothing inappropriate. Please don't talk about individuals. If you do have concerns about individuals, please direct those to the superintendent via another manner other than this meeting. All right, so we'll start with agenda items. Maureen Bonanno.
Good evening, Chairman Bernstein, Superintendent Dr. Jones, BOE members, cabinet members, and community members. I'm Maureen Bonanno, and I'm one of the GHS PTA co-presidents. My co-president, Terry Lamantia, is at college night at GHS. So I'm here tonight to speak about the Cardinal Field Improvement Project. The goal of the project is to meet our students' athletic and safety needs and to provide the general public with a facility that is compliant with the Americans with Disabilities Act and create an inviting facility for our students, parents, and guests. Bottom line is our students deserve better and our community deserves better. Our athletes and guests should have decent bathrooms. Family members or fellow students with disabilities should be able to easily attend events, and we need a safe facility. Improvements to Cardinal Stadium are long overdue, and the revised design resolves many issues. However, given the projected cost increases already, we need to be realistic. We want to support a plan that accomplishes our goals in an economical, reasonable, and timely manner. We are eager to listen to and participate in an active and serious conversation to help make Cardinal Field a safer, feasible, and accessible facility for all, while being a source of pride for our students, for our student athletes, parents, fans, and the town of Greenwich. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you. All right. The next speaker is Julie Deschamps.
Good evening. My name is Julie Deschamps from PTAC Green Schools. First, thank you to the board members for eliminating styrofoam trays from our school cafeterias, the responsible decision for our children's health and the environment. Since summer school, food services has trialed 2 disposable options as the board instructed. These paper boats were used until recently. As expected, they did not perform well. They do not provide ample space or food separation, and the boats are difficult to carry. They had to be doubled to prevent leakage at additional cost to the district. Their effectiveness is substandard. Now, these molded fiber trays have been adopted. The trays tested positive for PFAS last year, but the manufacturer reformulated the product, removing this toxic, persistent chemical. While the molded fiber tray offers more space and separation of foods, it is also prone to leakage, so a paper boat must be used with it, with wetter entrees. Its performance is not optimal. Moreover, these single-use disposables are not environmentally friendly. Nearly 500,000 molded fiber trays and paper boats will be thrown away to be incinerated across to taxpayers and our air and soil quality each year. The practice of using disposables is counter to classroom lessons about sustainability. We teach our children how to behave through actions, and students recognize the inconsistencies they see in our cafeterias. With these disposable wares, the district is throwing money into the trash bin, over $45,000 a year. The supply needs to be continually replenished, and these costs add up year after year. This is not fiscally responsible. The use of disposables is ineffective, environmentally unfriendly, pedagogically dishonest, and expensive. Reusable food service wares, like the same stainless steel trays that were piloted at New Lebanon School since May, are the most responsible solution for the environment, budget, and our children's education. The New Lebanon pilot achieved an 80% reduction of waste by volume. Custodial workload was significantly reduced. There was no increase in kitchen staff hours or labor expenses.
30 seconds.
Beyond these named benefits, there is a fiscal advantage. The district will not pay over $45,000 annually for purchasing of disposables. The initial return on investment for usable trays and dishwashers can be reached in only a few years. Our schools can save money from purchasing, and the town will no longer pay for disposal of 500,000 single-use trays. We urge the Board of Education and Superintendent Jones to finally support funding for reusable trays and dishwashers at all
Thank you, Julie.
schools.
All right, the next speaker is Estelle Rufio. Estelle? Maybe not. Okay, then we've got Dan Edelstein, followed by Carolyn Lerum.
Hello, good evening. My name is Dan Edelstein. My son Joe was in the school system here in Greenwich from 1998 until he aged out 6 years ago at the age of 21. He had and still has multiple disabilities. He uses a wheelchair, is nonverbal, and has significant cognitive delays, among other challenges. After years of struggle in elementary and middle school, I addressed this board in 2009, toward the end of Joe's freshman year at GHS, to alert it to the terrible conditions for SPED students there, and assumed at that point that my days of speaking out about those issues were behind me. That was until I read what this May, the September 19th Greenwich Time article about the ongoing struggles parents are experiencing trying to get an appropriate education for their kids. I felt like I was in a time warp. I'm here this evening to tell you that these issues aren't new. They were present almost throughout the extent of Joe's time in the school system. Reading phrases in that article like, quote, "We want administrators who know the law and follow it," and "the district delays, denies, and lies. When is this going to end?" brought back the pain and seemingly never-ending battles my wife and I had to fight to get the PPS to provide an appropriate education for Joe. Rather than creating a sense of collaboration with parents, the PPS almost always presented itself as an antagonist. Parenting a child with disabilities is harrowing enough on its own. It is made exponentially more difficult when those whose responsibility it is to educate your child put up barriers at almost every turn. I won't go into all the details of our experience in the system, but I will say that during those years we felt compelled to file 2 U.S. Office of Civil Rights complaints. And after that especially upsetting and dysfunctional freshman year at GHS, filed with 2 other families experiencing the same thing, a comprehensive complaint with the State Board of Ed. At GHS that year, there had been a pervasive culture of what I called at the time malicious apathy emanating from PPS and GHS administration, which resulted in totally demoralized and unsupported SPED staff and a generally hostile attitude by general ed teachers towards SPED kids, many of whom expressed hostility to the very idea that they had to endure those kids in their classroom.
30 seconds.
We soon learned that things didn't have to be that way. In short, I'll have to summarize, Chris Winters came along and really changed the culture at GHS. He is a hero to us. I'm not supposed to talk about individuals, but I'm talking about him in a positive way, so I hope that's okay. The day before he started school, he told a meeting of the entire faculty that if they didn't think that every child had the capacity to learn, and if they weren't willing to teach every child, that they should look for work elsewhere.
Time.
Chris Winters made a big change at GHS.
Thank you very
Clearly,
much.
the time to change at PBS is overdue.
Thank you. The next speaker is Caroline Leon, followed by Jennifer Katai.
Good evening. My name is Caroline Laram, and I am the mother of a special education student here in Greenwich Public Schools. In June of this year, brave parents spoke up about grievances they and their children have experienced with the special education system here in Greenwich. Those stories motivated the Board of Education to unanimously call for an audit of the special education program to be included in the 2021 operating budget. Then in September, the PPS director said a focused review by the University of Connecticut is in the works. She stated, "We are going to engage in a special education review process this year." She also stated she would present more details at the Board of Ed meeting in September. However, nothing was presented at last month's board meeting. At the same meeting, there was a reference to an initiative called Key to Ed, but the description on what Key to Ed entails has not been thoroughly explained. Most recently, I have heard from my special education representative that there will be a parent survey sent out, but I know no other details, other than it will survey parents, but not teachers. If this is true, this is very concerning, as we greatly depend on collaboration with our teachers.
Their opinions and experiences regarding special education are vital to how this system works. They are the ones on the front lines delivering the services, and we demand that they have an equal voice and they also get an anonymous survey. This survey isn't complete and will not be effective if we do not include our teachers. Also, who is conducting this survey? Is it an outside agency or is it the district? Special education parents continue to ask for an audit of the special education department, one that the board, not the department, has control over. And we ask for basic communication regarding any survey or audit taking place. Please walk parents through the details and scope of the audit and survey before it is performed. Please explain how it's going to be conducted, who's conducting it, and how it should affect special education programming. Transparency is key, given the recent concerns that have been voiced by parents. To clarify, special education parents feel that there has been a lot of discussion about a survey, an audit, and a program called Key to Ed, and we are seeking more information and details with respect to these efforts.
Thank you. The next speaker is Jennifer Katai, followed by Alon Katai.
In case you don't know who I am already, my name is Jennifer Katai, and I'm very emotional tonight, so I'm going to ask you to bear with me. My husband and I spoke at the June 13th board meeting, and tonight I want to share with you what's transpired since that meeting. In mid-July, I requested a meeting with the new superintendent along with a small group of other parents. We expressed our deep concern for our children and the current state of the special education program. I explicitly told the new superintendent that we intended for the meeting to be held in a constructive spirit and not an adversarial one. She appeared to take copious notes and wrote down our email addresses, and since then, not a single parent has heard back from her. We understand and we are empathetic to the fact that you are busy tending to many people's concerns and situations. I am here tonight to say we believe in you and fully support you. We know you can change this district for the better. You should know that I speak not only for myself, but also for many families district-wide in saying, despite what you have been told by this administration, we love and support our teachers and applaud all of their efforts. In my opinion, if you want to see how a school should be run, you would be well advised to visit the principal at ISD. She is one of the district's finest. She and her school adhere to a set of standards that are on a level to which all others should aspire. My hope is that what you hear tonight will serve as a wake-up call. After the echoes of deafening silence, we felt we had no other choice but to file violations with the State Department of Education, despite the callous, dismissive references made by the current PPS director, PPS coordinator, and the assistant superintendent that my husband and I were, quote, one-off angry parents, and our daughter was, quote, emotionally unbalanced. The State Department of Education concluded quite differently. From our daughter's case alone, 7 violations were found in our favor. Some of the more noteworthy ones were, it is required that the special education teachers at the old Greenwich Elementary School must go through a
30 seconds.
remediation process within the next 30 days to learn how to write and implement an IEP. It is recommended that the district must review how they write and implement all IEPs district-wide. It is required that within the next 10 days, the district must have an outside evaluator reevaluate my daughter at the district's expense. That evaluator will be responsible.
Thank you. Alon Katai, please.
It is required that within the next 10 days, the district must have an outside evaluator to reevaluate my daughter at the district's expense. That evaluator will also be responsible for planning our daughter's future IEPs. Number 4, furthermore, Greenwich Public Schools are to provide our daughter with financial compensation for all of the services that our daughter did not receive because her IEP was not appropriate. All of this occurred at OGS and was overseen by the current principal, PPS director, PPS coordinator, and assistant SI. Your reprehensible actions against our family will never be forgotten. Your shameful pattern of academic negligence, your bullying and retaliatory tactics that you employ not just with our family, but also with many here tonight will no longer be tolerated. Your prime abuse of taking needy families to due process you know they cannot afford to pay is sickening. You care nothing about the academic welfare of these children, safeguarding the illusion of no wrongdoing while merely perpetuating your own self-interests come next second to nothing. Administrators who violate children's civil rights have no place in the Greenwich Public School system or anywhere else for that matter. This, as my wife said, is your wake-up call. Our resolve is unshakable. We will neither relent nor rest until administrative changes are implemented at the highest levels. The consequences of not doing so are far too dire. It is the academic welfare and futures of our children that hang in the balance. My daughter, who for the last year has been put through a living hell, is to this day still missing 50% of the services that she should have been receiving since the inception of her IDP. Thank you.
That's all the speakers we have signed up. Is there anybody else that wishes to address the board on an agenda or non-agenda item? All right, seeing none, we'll move on to the next portion of our meeting, which is monthly reports, starting with the superintendent.
Thank you. I just have a couple of items tonight because I know we have a long agenda. First of all, just an update on food service. Dr. Ann Carabillo has put together an update for us. First of all, the interim food service director, David Nenarello, is here tonight, so welcome. He is he's very passionate about food service, and he is working with the team across the district on process and procedures, and really improving the menu quality as well. We've also moved again away from the styrofoam. We have increased the budget from $19,000 to $45,000 in order to use the other type of tray. So they're looking at how can we recoup that within the budget for this current school year. They are also really posting the core values in all of our cafeterias so that we're really going all the way back to what is the mission of really food service and having that kind of cafeteria restaurant mentality for children to really serve the best, and not only in the food that we serve children, but also in how they're greeted when they come into the cafeteria. And we want the cafeteria to be a pleasant place for children. We are also, there is an increase of 30% of a la carte sales at GHS, and that is with a real concerted effort about just access, trying to get the lines where they're not as long, so that children want to eat our food. And we have started marketing all of the new food menu items. So he's hit the ground running in just a couple of weeks. So thank you for that. We also, I was in Hartford yesterday, and it's just as a very short update, again, working on the soil issues at GHS. We have people ask us all the time, are we continuing to move forward? It was a very productive meeting. We hope to have an update for the community within the next couple of weeks. And homecoming, just congratulations. I think the students left, but they did a phenomenal job. A lot of planning went in. They changed the dance night to actually have a movie night. And, kudos to them for trying something new. Wonderful parade. It was my first parade, and that was a very fun, excellent game. And last but not least, we have started our feasibility committees for Julian Curtis, so that community is very excited to see us moving forward, and also for the GHS entry and media. I will say on the GHS project, there was overwhelmingly unanimous from the committee that their main focus is really that entryway and the safety of that. So we're considering as a committee as we move forward, do we even write that RFP a little bit differently where we can get good information on both of those components to talk about separately. But our goal is to get good ed specs to the board on both of those projects this year. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, next up are reports of, yep, Ann. There you go.
Okay, thank you. Tony, just real quick. Since you mentioned soil, can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Since you mentioned soil issues, is there an update on Western Middle School? I know it's a different program that we're in, but.
With Western, once we move forward on the high school, that's going to help us, that helps inform what will happen at Western. So they're kind of together because it's really about what will DEEP and the EPA, what do they expect in remediation and what level of remediation.
All right. So next up is reports of officers, committees, and liaisons. Ms. Olson, did you have anything?
The nomination packets are available in each school and online beginning in December, and the deadline to keep in mind for completing the packets would be March 12th to have them out there in the communication office, and just set aside also the date April 21st would be when the selection of honorees are, and the evening of the 21st is the when they'd be notified. And 22nd they get announced, and 23rd to be presented. So there's many dates coming up, exciting dates, but the one to keep in mind now would be March 12th would be when the nomination packets are due.
Great. Thank you.
Yes, so just to piggyback on food services, I know we thought it was going to be an agenda item today, but it's not. So I just want to close the loop, my last business meeting that I'll be attending. So you remember last spring we talked about a few pilots that we were considering, and the direction from the board was to go out and price the different pilots. So before John Hopkins left, he did put together the financials. One was status quo, one was going with a food service management company, one was using Brigade, the consultant, the other one was No Fuss Lunch, and then one was self-improvement. So needless to say, self-improvement and status quo are the most cost-effective, meaning we need the least amount of money from the DET to fund our food services operation. So the thought was with a changing interim food services director and also the menu subcommittee work that they started last spring and into the summer, that we would stick with this year being the self-improvement option. It can cost more in some regards, less in some regards, like moving away from meat dishes to more bean or vegetable, plant-based menu items, as well as we envision some increased participation. As Julie mentioned in the community comments, we do have the information on the paper boats and the fact that the PFABs aren't in the molded fiber, but as you heard, over the long term, it's not as cost effective. So our expectation on November 7th is that there'll be information for us to make a decision in a capital, or maybe it's not November 7th, maybe it's another budget meeting, but what the capital expenses would be to go to a more reusable tray dishwasher permanent solution. Also met with student government, ex-com, so Tony was with me, and we talked about student stress, weighted honors classes, the thing that I think we always talk about, but something that's new is the vaping, and that kids are starting to get addicted in middle school, and that the first selectman has a youth advisory commission, and Zane and another student government student, Mark, are going to be helping put together a video on the dangers of vaping. And it made us think about, we had the survey that the Prevention Council did last year, and maybe at a future board meeting we can get some information on what the Prevention council is doing based on the survey results, because I think there was an expectation that we would get some federal funds to put in some educational programs around drugs and alcohol and hopefully vaping use. The student government also talked about the types of things that they're going to try to accomplish during the year and what actually are the students' concerns. And two that bubbled to the top were environmental awareness as well as social inclusiveness, feeling like one community, something we could all aspire to.
You stating anything?
As the CAVE liaison, I encourage all board members who are continuing and all candidates for the board to go to the CAVE convention in November. Michael will sign you up. I know he's on it. Thank you so much.
All right, anything down this side?
We have our own, do you have your own? No, yes, sorry. We don't need to share our germ.
I don't know if they can both be on at the same time.
Okay.
Let's see. Policy we're going to review tonight. I did the ad hoc strategic plan. So we had some discussion at our retreat. We sort of typed out that timeline that had been discussed. Dr. Jones had said that she had some feedback in terms of some dates and other things she was going to get back to us. So I think depending on that information, we'll decide about another meeting and any updates to that timeline can be discussed with the board.
Yes, Parks and Rec Committee, as you know, Dan Watson and myself are the liaisons with the Parks and Rec Department on doing a feasibility study on our fields across the town. We had a lot of excellent bids, and we are in the process, the committee's in the process of choosing the finalists with some predetermined criteria. So hopefully when our come back next time, we'll be able to report on who that will be.
I'm happy to report. Next year, we should not have a meeting conflict with the college night. Coming up for our November agenda is our meeting calendar for next year. I know you guys are going to get this very excited about this. Some members up here won't need it anymore, sadly. But anyway, we're one of the things that is being taken into consideration is making sure we are not scheduled against college night. As a parent of a high schooler, I'm happy about that. All right, with that, we're going to move on to our discussion items. So the first item is the Cardinal Field project. Ms. O'Donnell, if you
Good evening. Just a quick recap as context for this evening's presentation. On February 22nd, 2018, the Board of Education approved the continuation of work to advance the Cardinal Field Improvement Project to the design phase for Option B. During the fiscal year 1920 budgeting process, roughly around March of this year, the project's $3.9 million needed for the final stages of design and construction to include the home side bleachers, the press box with an elevator, visitor side bleachers, new lights on existing poles, and related utilities and site development were conditioned by the BET in order to explore the use of the space underneath the home side bleacher structure. In June 2019, alternative under the bleacher designs were presented to the Board of Education. This past summer's work included 60% design development and an independent cost estimate. This evening, Russ Davidson of KG&D Architects will provide a progress report, including a review of various cost estimates, and Ed Heine from NASCO Construction Services will address questions regarding construction cost estimates. Thank you.
I am. Good evening, Russ Davidson with KG&D. So we have three things to talk about, which is you'd commissioned us to do design development so we could get more detailed cost estimates. So we want to go over the design development and then cost estimates, and then we have a key issues summary. As Lori said, this is Ed Heine with NASCO Construction Services, who was hired independently by the school district, and we were asked to help coordinate their services, but they are not did not work with us. So again, the elements included in the design, I think Lori just read this, so I won't go through it, but the bullet point list on the bottom is everything that was originally proposed to be in phase one. One of the questions that came up during the earlier discussions was what was the program or what were the specifications for the buildings that were proposed to be under the bleachers. So they'd actually been reduced from the feasibility study, but the first column shows the room sizes that everybody felt was appropriate, and it totaled 7,210 square feet. Then we started looking at an option for buildings under the bleachers. A building that large does not fit under the bleachers. So we originally thought a smaller building of 4,675 square feet would fit, and then the one highlighted in yellow is what was developed as a design. So it's important to understand that if you put the building under the bleachers, it will be smaller than what was approved by the committee as the minimum size for these functions. And this list details all of the individual changes. The team rooms are about 10% smaller. There's a few spaces that aren't provided, like coaches areas, a ticket booth, and a second referee station. Other than that, everything is provided in the smaller building. And we just point this out because the question came up. Will a smaller building work? It's certainly better than everything you've got today, but it is smaller than what was originally thought to be the minimum size. So if you went forward with buildings under the bleachers and the rest of the project, including the road and relocating the tennis courts, this might be what the overall campus plan looks like eventually. But the first phase that was estimated really focuses on these highlighted areas here. It does not move the tennis courts, it does not get into the road. So you do get the home side bleachers, the driveway behind it, and the visitors bleachers and a walkway and related work. So this is line drawings of the home side bleachers on the top, same size as was included in the feasibility study, same size that was requested, and roughly the same seating that you have now. The difference is it's fully accessible, handicap ramps on each side, and you'll see in the upper left an elevator that goes up to a press box level, which has a nice divided press box, so you can film the games and have separate coaches. It's a pretty standard bleacher arrangement, and we think this would be a real benefit to you to get these bleachers done. The visitors' bleachers would also be changed, about the same seating capacity, maybe a little bit larger, I think 80 seats larger. Again, ramps on the ends and an elevated front walkway, so better sight lines on both the home and visitor side. You'll be able to see over people standing on the sidelines. This is the proposed building under the home side bleachers. It's actually two buildings. On the left is there's a large team room in each one. The men's room is on the left, the women's room is on the right. The smaller rooms are underneath are a family toilet, referee spaces. Each team room has their own toilets. There's a separate first aid room and a very small concession area. And then you'll see the bump out on the upper left is the elevator and the elevator vestibule. Since we build everything in 3D, this is actually what it would look like. We have a young person who's pretty excellent with this, so we hope that looks realistic to you. But that is, with the bleachers moved forward, you can see how much closer you'll be to the field with the new elevated bleachers. And because the first row is really 4 or 5 feet above the level of the field, you can have excellent sight lines over the cheerleaders and over the people standing on the sidelines. A real improvement, more sense of immediacy. And then you'll see the elevator shaft that went up. We did not price the Cardinal. We just put that on there. And one of the things to mention here is that these are the existing light poles, and the scope here did include changing the fixtures on those light poles. Those light poles are not ideally located, so you can see that we squeeze the bleachers right up to it, and that's sort of what limits the bleacher configuration as well, and the ramp. We have to really work around those poles. This is the view from the back. And you can see the food truck plaza to your right, and the small concession opening, the elevator, and the walkway around the press booth, press box at the top. We worked very hard to make this as simple a building as possible so it would have the lowest cost. It's a concrete block building, but it does have to meet energy code. It does have to have ventilation, and it does have to have a fire rating, because you have 2,000 people sitting on top of it. So it cannot be a combustible building. It actually must have a fire separation in the roof. So we did the code research. We kept it absolutely as simple as can be, and even at that, it costs more than we all were hoping. So there's some stats on it. 2,004 seats on the home side, 548 on the visitor. A little bit of description of the building. The inside is painted concrete block with polished concrete floors and ceramic tile in the toilet rooms. It's not a fancy building, but again, it's a complex building because it's a small square footage with something like 7 toilet rooms. And it's just, it adds up. It's got every trade in a compact amount of space. And again, that was estimated independently. I also want to point out the site work, because the site work is one of the things that costs more than originally anticipated. So in the budgets, I thought the phase 1 was budgeted at 3.8. Lori just said 3.9, so I think the budget went up. But the bad news was the independent estimate really priced that scope of work at 4.5. And there's 2 reasons there. And one is the elevator, and one is the site work. The big one is the site work. I wanted to point out that when this was originally one project, which is what the board went to the DET with, it was a $17 million project that had $5 million worth of site work. And then in April, we were asked, cut it in 3. And we were a little too ambitious about the amount of site work we included in phase 1. More site work needs to be done related to the bleachers to deal with storm drainage and to get the walkways in that are needed. So it's not that it went up in price, it's that there's more scope in phase 1 that needs to be done. And that's the primary reason that that 3.8 turned to 4.5. The second reason is you have a much better elevator in this proposal than we ever anticipated doing. We were hoping to use what's called a limited use, limited access elevator. The acronym is ALULA. LULAs can't go to 30 feet. They only can go to 27 feet. So we really needed to use a full hydraulic elevator in this case. And so we picked a nice elevator from ThyssenKrupp. I think it'll serve you well. It's a much better elevator. It's much faster. It'll hold more people. It has a vestibule, so you're getting value for that, but it's almost double, a couple $100,000 more than what we had originally budgeted for the Lula. So those are the 2 items of why the 3.8 went to the 4.5. But a lot of people were hoping that the building under the bleachers would be so cost effective that it would fit within the 3.8, and the answer to that is it really is no. That building is $474 a square foot. The 2 buildings are $2.2 million. We were asked to work with the independent estimator. So what if you didn't build the building now? What would you spend? And that answer is $165,000. And that is for the subsurface work, plumbing, utilities, and foundations. Then you could put the bleachers up and you could come back and put that building in at any point in the future. The budget to do all the work we just showed you, including all the buildings, is $6.6 million. If you only did the subsurface work, that would be 4.6. And we just wanted to point out that in the phase 1 budget, we were asked to include the cost for services to get design and approvals for the next phase. So if there's not to be a next phase, because you decide you're going to do this under the building thing and stop, or stop for now, that's $500,000 that comes out of any one of those numbers up above. So that was originally in the multi-phase plan so that you would always be ready for the next year's allocation, so it would truly be a 3-year plan. not a build, design, it wouldn't become a 5-year plan. So I hope that's clear. There's literally dozens of possible permutations for all the work that's been done with 3 different site plan options and lots of different building plans. But we attempted to frame some key issues for you, which you may or may not agree are the key issues. And I'll just state them and then we'll be happy to take questions. But does the board want to proceed as quickly as possible with a multi-phase plan that includes relocation of the tennis courts and a new access road to the high school campus? So I think that's one of the fundamental questions. And the other one is, what is the best location and size for the new building or buildings that contain the team rooms, toilet facilities, and ancillary functions? And then, you know, if the answer is you want to reduce the overall scope of the project because $17 million plan for the original option B was lovely, everybody got very excited about it, the board approved it, you asked for funding, it was a 1.5-year feasibility study process, but things change, and you finish your master plan and other priorities emerge, and we completely understand that. But if you wanted to do one project and get it as far along as you can and then stop, then I would say do what's in the design development drawing. Build the building under the bleachers and ask for the $6.1 million funding. And if you don't want to decide at this time, and you don't want to ask for the funding for the building, then I would say do that $4.1 million plan and just do the foundations. And that leaves you all options open. You can build on it later, or you could build it elsewhere. So I hope that was helpful, and Ed and I are here to answer any questions you may have.
Francis?
Compared to the original plan B,
We're going to give you the wire.
compared to the Plan B that we had from before, I believe there were parking spaces between the bleachers and Putnam, if I recall. I don't see those in the new, so are we giving up whatever those parking spaces were along there?
Yes, a couple of things. If you're going to have students and teams walking behind the bleachers to get into that building, we actually didn't think the parking spaces were a very good idea. That pavement would be only used, we think you'd put up a barrier actually so no vehicles would drive on that section of pavement when games are in session. It's really about getting to the storage and emergency access. Well, you know, we would put up something to prevent access. So, you know, this is one of the benefits of taking the time to do a more detailed design. If you put a building back there, you shouldn't have a building backing up to a parking lot with 2,000 people rolling around.
Thank you for being here for the millionth time. Really appreciate it. I'm not recommending this, but I need to ask all the questions so I have a full understanding. Did you think about the cost of the elevator, which seems to me the most wasteful use of money? Did you think about using the original elevator as proposed, lowering the height? And if we lowered the height, how many seats would we lose?
We didn't get that far, but we could of course do that going forward. I think you'd lose almost 4 rows though, and that's quite a bit. The other thing is that you may remember we were asked, is the elevator mandatory? And the elevator is mandatory for a press box of that size. But if you made a smaller press box, the elevator is not mandatory.
How much smaller, Bill?
About somewhere between half and 2/3 of the size that's being shown now. So it would still be almost twice of what you have today. But then you need a pretty large independent stair to get people up and down from there. The good thing about this elevator that is included is it's good high speed and it's good high capacity. So I actually think that people would take it to get up to the back rows of the bleachers. So it has some real value, especially to disabled individuals, because they can get to the press box really well. So, you know, I don't, and I would also say that we've used a lot of Lula elevators, and as soon as they're installed, people find ways to avoid them. And they're pretty expensive.
If we make the elevators smaller, would that still then be, comply with the ADA requirements?
Yeah, it's really a minimal cap size. It's about the travel distance and the mechanics of the elevator. So it's a hydraulic, right? Dyson Krupp hydraulic. So it's really kind of a bottom of the line hydraulic elevator. We just couldn't use the little Lula lift.
So I want to ask about the center access to the stairs and how you envision the players coming off the field at the half. How are they getting behind the building to the team rooms?
Yeah, there would be gates in the fence. They would go around and around the sides and the back. They would not go through the middle. The middle had been proposed by some alternatives. We just didn't favor that because it brought a lot of people to one small choke point. And we like the idea of having the tunnel in the middle have stairs up to get to the seats and not breaking the ramp that's in the front with that tunnel so that you can walk all the way across the front from one side to the other. We think that this configuration will fill and empty much faster than splitting into two.
Ms. Steph?
Hi, Russ. Thank you again. This feels a little bit like my driveway quotes. They're just like all over the place, and I'm just trying to figure out.
We all wish it was simpler.
Exactly. But I imagine have you had a chance to opine on GAF's plan? Because obviously I'm trying to understand the massive difference there is, of course, the pricing on the building below the bleachers. Everything else is sort of a not meaningful difference when it comes down to it.
Right.
So, and especially the elevator. I mean, as we talk about ADA accessibility, I don't think we should play with the elevator. I think that's very important. Let's get that right. But sort of pricing the actual square footage of the building underneath. Have you had a chance to go through their plan in any detail to figure out what the differences are?
We haven't done details on that.
Okay.
Mr. Chair?
Kathleen, you're asking a great question. I asked the same question. I spoke to the GAF. There wasn't the thing we asked for in June wasn't done. So it's kind of like just leave that aside because it seems to me the thing we're looking at here is C versus F. And I spoke to the GAF leadership. I spoke to 4 of them, and I asked them what their point of view was on this, and I can send you guys the email they sent me. They're in full support of the plan that is column F. I did not have the chance to ask them if they still intended to donate if we were to endorse plan F, but they are in full support of plan F, and their suggestion is doing it now.
Yeah, just so for the people who don't have the same sheet that was handed out to the board, so that would be doing everything that's shown in design development with the buildings under the bleachers. And if you feel like there's one phase and you want to get as much done as possible, that's the way to do it.
But Russ, if I read this, you have like different options here. We're really looking at your revision of the original plan is column C, correct?
Yes.
And
the original phase 1.
Yes, right? And your, no, I know it doesn't. If you remember, the original did not have the building because it was anticipated we would build a second building at a later time.
Phase 3. Right?
Phase 3, right? And your new estimate for under the bleacher, let's call it Plan 2A. Let's call the first one Plan 1, the second one Plan 2A. Is with the bleachers build it now 6.6, right?
Yeah, but if you, again, if you.
Yeah, I know you we can talk about the 500 and what happens on
Yeah.
phase 2, but let me just say that for a second. So it's 4.5 just for bidding versus 6.6. And your alternate, which I would call 2B, is 4.6, which is build the pad, but don't build the building now, maybe later, right? So we're really looking at C versus F with a variation, which is column G. Is that the right way to read this chart?
Pretty much, yeah.
Okay. And then these other things, B, D, and E, are for information, but they're not really relevant to our decision-making necessarily at this point, right?
Correct. That's
Yes.
just to track it back to what
Yeah.
else you have.
So you can tie it off. Okay. Because that's what, okay, I'm glad I understand how to read that spreadsheet now. So those are really the choices before us. And your other point was each one of these includes 494,136, which is design dollars for phase 2.
Design and approvals.
Design and approvals for phase 2. And we probably, for my purposes, I didn't include that because, but it doesn't impact because it's in every single estimate. Because you pointed out rightly that it could be recouped if we didn't necessarily proceed with that. But at the same time, I think from the perspective of the finance board of the town of Greenwich, they view that as encumbered for a very specific purpose. So am I right to say the number's really 4 million? Let's just take out phase 2. Let's talk phase 1 for a minute. It's really 4 million versus 6.1 versus 4.1.
That's right.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Ms. Rabin.
Hi, thanks again for coming. I echo my fellow board members. I know that you've spent a lot of time with us. I'm confused, I guess, if we do disregard column D, the difference in bleacher demolition, like way off, and then I'm confused on what row 13 represents, because in column D it says 500,000. I don't know what that's totaling versus what, F13 is totaling.
Yeah, well, D13 is the GAF number for a 5,000 square foot building. And,
Their number was originally, the reason that doesn't make any sense is that number was originally $1 million. So tying to that number is kind of and since nobody did the work on the administration or the architect, it's kind of a missing piece of information somebody wants.
we don't know where that number is. It was just on a GAF sheet.
The board does.
And we put it there.
So for F13, the 2.266 million, that's totaling up everything above it.
Yeah.
Okay.
There actually was a minor math error there. So it's 2243571, which was pointed out to me by our.
It's actually a pulled number. That's a total of building, everything in the building. So the building itself is going to cost that much. It's not totaling everything else.
Got it.
Russ, I still don't want to give up on the emergency access exit road. Can we decouple that from other decisions about the entire campus under Plan B?
Yeah, I mean,
What? No, I need to know what the constraints are.
yeah, it can absolutely be decoupled from what you want to do here and what we showed here. You could do it next year, you could do it in 4 years, you could do it in 5 years. Once that idea hit the drawing board, a lot of people thought it was an excellent thing to do. So it got incorporated into an overall plan. Doesn't mean you have to do it as part of this part. And if, it was everybody's best intentions to come up with a comprehensive plan, and we thought we were responding to the need for 7,000 square foot of space, which doesn't fit under a 2,000 seat bleacher, right? But something pretty good fits under the 2,000 seat bleacher. And I would just remind, if you weren't part of the original, it was actually February of 2018, when we did our first options, we showed a standalone building and a building under the bleachers.
Right.
So we're back to literally day one of the feasibility study, which is fine. Things change. But especially when the building grew in its aspirations, it seemed to make even more sense. And then the idea of a training facility on the second floor, which obviously doesn't fit near the bleachers. But those can all be done later. You can move the road at any time. And none of this gets in the way of any of that.
Okay, thank you.
I think the road, the way it's been discussed, basically it's contingent, it should be contingent upon state approval. Because without that, you basically can't have a road cut because the post road's a state road. So it is something that I think is worthy of being considered. I highly support the road, but I think if the state's not going to give us approval, going down that path is probably a fool's errand. So that's just.
It's my understanding you had a traffic study partially underway to address exactly that issue before we would go any further with the road design. So.
Right. So one thing I do want to ask you about is, putting aside the town's funding mechanism, the fact that this budget wouldn't, if we request additional monies, which we would need, wouldn't be approved till May, what would be the time frame for getting this bill? Let's say we went with F.
Well, there's project cost for the work above, which is phase one cost of $474, not the $494. The time frame would get going with design because everybody agrees that the bleachers are needed, and actually the independent estimator, our estimator, and GF all had almost identical numbers for the bleachers, and that's the key here. So let's get a design going for everything, and then based on what funding for construction comes available, we can bid it in pieces. Right. And you can build what you get funded.
I guess one thing I do want to note, though, the way our town budget rules work, the money is encumbered to build bleachers and bleachers only, and the things that we asked for that were approved by the BET and the RTM. If we are going to deviate from our plan, if we decide we're going to build things under the bleachers, we basically will need to go back before those bodies to ask for different money and revert the money they gave us back. I think that's the basics of it. It's probably a little more complicated than that, but it's something we'd have to take into consideration. Mr. Chair.
First I had a question, but then I also had a comment about this. Russ, at this stage, it sounds like I was a little puzzled by the 60%. There's this reference to 60% in design and what have you. Simple minds like me, that I think of that like more than halfway. So when you reference 60% in here, and you talk about 60% design, what does it mean? Because that sounds like me, it sounds to me like you're closing in on a project that, to use a pejorative term, shovel ready. Well, you sound like we're getting close to shovel ready here.
The 60% design.
You've already expended that, right?
We've already earned it, yep.
No, meaning you've already, I didn't mean that. You've expended the level of effort to get to 60% already. Is that right?
Correct.
So how far away does that get us to a final design that could go to construction?
You need to get to 100% to go to bid.
Okay, and how much longer would that take, roughly? Guess? Month, 2 months, 3 months?
2 to 3 months.
Okay.
We're pretty close. And I just wanted to point out that, a lot of people have said, why do you go so far design to get a cost estimate? The further you go, the more accurate your numbers.
Sure, of course.
And you wanted confidence. So I was reluctant to stick with a schematic or conceptual estimate. And typically at a 60% level of design, you can talk to, in the private sector, you can talk to your trusted contractor and arrive at a fixed price for the building.
Mm-hmm.
That's commonly done. It's called a guaranteed maximum price contract based on design development. And that's how the private sector works. The public sector is not allowed to work that way. So when you wanted a reliable cost estimate, and we have to give these gentlemen and ladies detailed documents to do an independent takeoff, that's the most sensible way to do it. I frankly think you should do every public project that way before you set a budget. You would have very few overruns that way. But most of the public sector isn't set up that way, but everybody in the private sector does it that way.
The one other part of that thing is, I'm sorry, you were talking about a traffic study for this? What were you talking about?
When there was momentum to do the entire original option B, we were authorized to get started on a couple of things for a limited amount of money that was available. And you independently, the school district got an RFP out for a traffic study to look at the impact of that road, both internally to the campus and to start talking to the state. I understand that that was also only partially funded and was then stopped.
When was that approved by the board? Does anybody know when that was approved by the board? I don't recall ever seeing that item.
It was part of the scope of work.
Yeah,
But he just said it was done independently, not a part of his scope.
I think the funding was all funded.
Yeah, it was part of the funding for the project, but it was a separate study, not done by KG&D.
Okay, the last part I guess I would say about this, which was the point, the reason I was trying to get to a clarity, is I think we're mischaracterizing this. The reason that there have been so many questions and concerns from other, or one of the reasons, not the only reason, there have been concerns and questions from other town bodies, particularly the town finance board, is I don't think the town finance board universally has bought into $17 million. And the board, through this committee, has been communicating, obviously through a board vote on Plan B. I wasn't there for that vote, so I didn't vote yes or no on Plan B. I don't really have I never expressed a point of view on that. But at the same time, it's very clear if you talk to other town officials and you talk to other stakeholders like the GAF and what have you, there has not been a consensus around a $17 million plan. And even though that may be what the board wants through its votes, there's not a consensus for it. That's why you're seeing things like breaking up the project, encumbering sections, so on and so forth. I believe, from talking to other town bodies and the GAF, as I indicated to the board earlier, there would be a consensus for $6.6 million. And I don't think we need to wait till May for budgeting. If there was a need for money sooner to start construction, I would venture a beer or a glass of wine for every board member and the administration that if we needed the money, if we decided to go this way and we needed the money before July 1 next year, because I believe there's a consensus that we could get that money approved by the BET sooner rather than later and unencumbered. That's my guess.
Ms. Olson, did you have any questions or anything to add?
Yes, thank you, Russ. As always, you're very thorough and works very hard on all of this. I also would just echo that I think it's very important that we have to prioritize on an emergency access road. I do understand that it's subject to approval and it's more complicated than it seems, but I think that needs to be one of our priorities. Board level, and I also am just excited about the elevator, the ramp, and that it's finally going to be ADA accessible. We heard earlier from many parents that have had, special education parents who've had to endure months and years of noncompliance with the law. So I'm, this is one area where they will actually finally be able, ADA is accessible, and parents will finally be able to. One area in which we can improve, although there's many other areas we'll need to improve in that in terms of special education. But at least the accessibility. So I would be hesitant to do too much with the elevator size, just to make sure that it does follow the law. But thank you, Russ. I appreciate all of your detail in this.
I just want to add one thing on ADA accessibility. There's one aspect of it that is not addressed if you did this, which is nearby handicapped parking. That would still be quite remote, and you would end up using the little golf cart vehicles to get handicapped people from a parking area to the bleacher area until such time as you did something different with parking or roads.
We can still create a drop off back here.
That's right, and that was never intended to be the handicap parking, but you'd still have some challenges there, but it would be a huge improvement.
Okay, well, thank you for updating that.
Okay. Anyway, I know we thought this much, but I have to say, I kind of like where we're ending up. We're learning more every day, and that's okay. And I know this is just a discussion item, but I have to say I like the efficiency of it being under the bleachers. It makes sense to me. And maybe we get a little credit for being fiscally prudent with the BET. But because as I look at all of our fields, we have a lot to do. And so I do want to think about sizing this project appropriately. And I'm feeling like maybe we're there. So thank you.
Question for you, Lori. Do we have funding, or can we find funding to complete our original intent on the traffic study for the access road? Or would we have to build that in here? Do we have funds for that?
Yes.
Okay, so whatever decision the board makes, I want to add the RFP for the traffic study.
So I agree with Mrs. Stowe. I think that we need, we are? That I think putting the buildings, the structures underneath the bleachers is the most cost efficient. It's also time efficient, and the quicker we do things, the cheaper they become. And also, we don't have to then have prolonged rental of the scaffolding, which is quite expensive, that we're now renting. So I would certainly recommend going ahead with this. And I think any decision about roads and tennis courts and all that can be put off to another time. I think we voted on Plan B because there was only A, B, and C. And then this came out D. So I think that's why we're reconsidering the B vote. And I think this is a smart way to proceed.
I feel like I said this for another agenda item. Bird in the hand is worth two in the bush. We never know what's going to happen with the soil, where we want to put another field house, and any kind of issues that would go down that path. So I also support putting the building under the bleacher. I know I won't have a vote on it, but that's my sentiment, and I agree with the traffic study that we should move forward with that.
So I did have a concern, which I think you partially answered, but then there was a take back, which is, it's great to have an ADA accessible bleacher in that area, but like if you have to go, grandmother's house through the woods and around the things to get there, I'm not sure we're being all that friendly. I mean, I think one of the really nice things in terms of the road and the drop-off areas, you were getting people much, much closer to where they wanted to be, whether it was teams in the buses, whether it was people in wheelchairs, on crutches, whatever it may be. And we're going to have very limited ability to get people back there. So we're going to have, lots of lovely things going on at the bleachers, but we're going to have a hard time getting them there. So I do think it would be nice to consider that. I still also think it would be great to have a road out of there. I mean, I think, the neighbors were happy about that idea. I think in terms of safety issues, having another road there, I think is very valuable. I agree there's no point in doing it if the state's not going to let us, but I do think there's some real usefulness to that. And I think the other thing is sort of a bigger picture issue, because I honestly don't really feel that strongly about where the building is, and I've said this before when we got our Blum Shapiro back, I feel like we have our conversations in isolation, and then the BET has their conversations, and then the RTM has their conversations. And it's like, we're going around and around in circles, and I sort of feel like saying, well, it's great if we vote on this, but if it just gets squashed, kind of what's the point? I think we need to reconsider our mechanisms, our procedures of how we do this, and when do we have more group conversations, how do we figure how to make these decisions so it doesn't become antagonistic. It's like us against them. It's like we're making a decision together. And I think the Blum Shapiro, I feel like it did go through and sort of help us in terms of some of the processes once we get to the point of going, but I don't think it went back to ground zero, which had been my initial question when we met with them, which is, from the first moment we have an idea, how are we organizing ourselves to go through this process efficiently as a town? And I really think that's something we need to consider, and I'm not sure how we get there.
The good news is Mr. Chair has actually bet us beer and wine that we would get support for this, so I'm thinking we'll take him up on that at some point. I did want to ask for us, because there's a reduction in size, right? When this was originally scoped, it was over 1,000 square feet for the team rooms. Having been at homecoming, watch how many players we have dressed, is 920 square feet the right amount? And I'm also looking at Mr. Lindeen back there.
Well, it was originally 1,200, and then we went with the athletic director and looked at some rooms in the high school, and we came down to 1,090 that would be acceptable. This is about 920. It's going to be a squeeze. You have very large football teams, you have very large track teams, so it's going to be a squeeze. But there'll be ventilated and insulated rooms, and right now you don't have any.
I know it's an improvement from watching the visiting teams wait in the corner while the half runs by. Mr. Chair.
Unsurprisingly, I'm going to put a stake in the ground. I've watched this project, and it's not unlike other projects that we've had in the long time that I've been serving at the board. This would be my watchword. Let's not let the perfect become the enemy of the good. You know, we have a totally substandard stadium facility. It is long overdue. We can tilt at windmills on $17 million projects, and I would hope someday that maybe that gets built. I see a project here that is doable, that will dramatically improve our athletic facility. It gives you new lights, new bleachers both sides, team rooms, bathrooms, food. Candidly, I'm pretty convinced that the KG&D can figure out how to create a drop-off coming down the road to the back of the facility for handicaps that are controlled by police. Oh, by the way, the police are always out there if you've actually been to a game, so you know how it goes anyway. And I don't know why we wouldn't just kind of grab this and run. If the rest of it gets built sometime in our lifetime and approved, wonderfulness. I don't want to, this project has already gone on too long. So we need to take this up, whoever's here on the board, because it's not going to be taken up now, and it can't be taken up at our budget meeting. It's going to be taken up at the next time the new board meets. I'm going to make a suggestion. Two things happen at that meeting. Either an agenda plan or do it now. I want this item of a proposal for $6.6 million to be voted up or down by this board. It's a little bit like Brexit. We can talk about it forever, but eventually you have to make a decision. And then the second thing that has to happen is we need to appoint proper building committees. This thing has not been handled, it's been handled in a very unusual way. I've never been on a project that has a committee that's like a quasi kind of feasibility study that kind of morphed into kind of a building design committee. That's already done, but it's time, once we decide what we're building, immediately at the same time to appoint a proper building committee so we can move this project forward. Those are the two recommendations I'll be making, either through agenda plan or I'm glad to make the motion now.
Sorry, one more point. Just because I was sort of really trying to make sure I thought of everything that we were potentially losing with this change. And I think the other one was I forget the term you used, but like a workout area. And
Team training facility.
Thank you. It's fancier name. And I just want to say that, while that might seem like a luxury and this is sort of just for the teams, having had a son who wanted to be able to work out at the high school but was not part of a team, it's not just for the teams that's an advantage. It's for all the kids who would like to be in the gym and use the gym but who can't because the teams are using it. And, the teams get first priority, so we have a lot of kids who don't get in there and get workouts or things that they want to do because there's not enough room for both. So that is something else that we're losing with this that we would have had with the building.
All right, so this will come back to us at our November business meeting. Mr. Chair, just to your point, this will be on there as an action item. You can make whatever motions you want related to that action item. Yeah, it'll be an action item coming in November. I will say it'll be nice to hear from the GAF where they stand on donations, and if there are others in the community, we're happy to pass a hat in the room. But if the old timers or otherwise want to donate towards our stadium project, we'd welcome that. We'll take all comers. And Mr. Davidson, thank you for your patience with us. We appreciate it as always. All right, with that, we're going to move on to our academic report, the real star of tonight's show, humanities. So, Ms. Parisi, Ms. Elliott, come on down.
What if you take some of these trees? Can I take the chair? No. I mean, it's broken and it's
Good evening. In your board packet, you have the academic report for humanities. The last humanities report was presented on March 28, 2019. And with me this evening is Lori Elliott, our humanities program coordinator. This report is presented in 5 sections with a leading program summary to orient the boards. And you'll notice the inclusion of a conceptual framework to illustrate our commitment to the workshop model on page 2. Section 1 provides the program goals. Section 2 outlines our program costs. Section 3 outlines the program achievements and accomplishments, and you will notice our explicit analysis by grade and cohort beginning on page 10. It is our intention that you see the through line from our goals, our action steps to our outcomes and performance. And in section 4, we've outlined our program activities beginning on page 22. And in section 5, our 3 strategic levers on page 30. Combined to illustrate our commitment to the strategic plan, continuous school improvement, and changing practice in how we understand our learners to make learning personal. We hope you realize the potential in presenting this academic report tonight on October 17th to understand how we are acting on the evidence of our learners and implementing lead strategies to have a high impact on performance and practice. This report speaks to our investment in our learners, both adults and students. And the fabulous Ms. Elliott, our program coordinator for humanities, will share additional highlights that will focus on our strategies that are working well, those that will position Greenwich Public Schools to be very focused and future ready.
I did want to hit a few high points first, if we could. And I'm going to start in kinder and then work my way up. So looking through the data that we have for foundational literacy, which is really technically K-3. Third graders, of course, will move into the SB8 this year, but we have data that comes before that will occur. We have in your packet, it's page, I should have written this down, sorry. It is page 15. Sorry. Okay. At the bottom of that page, the charts there, this is a new chart. We haven't shared the information in this way before, but I think it's important as we talk about the growth through all of the years. And that chart is showing you the beginning of the year, this year, STAR results. So we've already had our first window, and it's close. It also combines the reading test, as well as the early literacy test, depending on which one is most appropriate for each child. We're able to actually pull this particular information as one subset. So there are other components of literacy being assessed on these screeners, but I pulled for you the foundational skills. So that would be print concepts and phonological awareness. Now that does occur in K and 1, but we have not given the kindergartners an assessment yet. It's early. So that's why you don't see a row for them. And then for grades K through 3, again, we can see information on phonics and word recognition as well as fluency. So if you can look at this various ways. My favorite way though is to first look at it as when the students are in grade 1, you know, the highest number that you have in phonics and word recognition is over there in beginning. So we're looking at 0 to 59% of the kids having mastered phonics and word recognition. Do not fret, that is what we expect to see in first grade, especially at the beginning of the year. But you can see then when they become third graders, we're up to 65% at mastery. It's a big jump between the grade levels, and it is expected through the brain development of early literacy. You're going to see similar work in fluency. Fluency is a little bit harder because fluency adds up the many things that we're teaching you to be a reader and puts it all together. You also get a little bit of comprehension from your fluency, so it is a higher scale. In the same piece, you can see that we start off at a 56% of kids are in that first phase, and by the time we move up into second and then move up into third, we're actually closer to 60% at mastery. So as far as pulling district-wide data about this information, this is really the best we can get you. We do have, of course, informal assessments that are taking place in class with running records and all those pieces, but that is a very personal assessment that is bigger than the numbers we can share. So with that, which I'm sure we'll talk about in a bit, you know, we also have foundations that went district-wide in kindergarten this year, which feeds directly into these types of results, which is why I set a long-term goal about the students who are kindergartners right now and the results that we'll see for them in this very chart when they're a first grader. Please let me see those numbers to be higher. So moving into SBA for our third through eighth graders, at level 4, which is the highest level we can get, we have more than 50% of our students in third through fifth grade scoring at level 4, which is a very high number. When you look at level 3 and 4, we're up over 75%. So the majority of our students are meeting or exceeding the proficiency marks on SBA. At middle school, we hit our goal this year, yay, of 40% of middle school students getting into level 4. That was an improvement of several percentage points over just the 1 year. So it's a very big goal for us to meet. And same thing, we're up over 75% of students though at 3-4, level 3 and 4. The two highest levels by grade, 5th grade is every year since the data I can pull back to 2015. 5th grade is actually always our highest results. So big praise for our 5th grade teachers and the work they're doing with their students. And then 7th grade is the second highest. So we've talked before about the dip that happens between 5-6, switching schools, teachers, peers, and everything else. And to come through 6th grade and come into 7th grade to see those are our second highest scores for the district is a big win, again, for the teachers and for us. For the SAT this year, we did drop a little bit in our total percentage of meeting standard, but we're still at 82% of our students. We'll talk a little bit more about some other demographic data that we can dig into there when we set our goals, but we are still more than 20% higher than the state, and we're doing well against some of our comparable districts as well. For AP, we have 6 more assessments within the humanities. We have 6 assessments within the humanities that we had more students taking the test, which was a big ask from me to Bridget and Lucy at high school. Get more students in those classes, more students taking the test. And when we look at just the score alone, we actually have 4 assessments where the number of students scoring 3 or higher went up. And 3 of those 4 are from the 6 that also had more kids. So we've seen a upward trend of more students taking the test and getting higher scores. The other comparable districts are on page 21 and 22. I did a lot of research really for myself too. I've been doing this since I came, but I feel like I'm finally getting a handle of here in the state. Well, really 2.5 years in the state. So I'm learning more and more about our neighboring districts and in comparison to ourselves. So Fairfield and West Hartford are most like us when you look at demographics, student counts, amounts of courses, teachers, things of that nature. And then we also have New Canaan and Darien who are very close to us and are similar in per pupil expenditures, but have much fewer students than we do. So that being said, you can see some of the highlights here. On page 21, it's our SBA as compared to those neighboring districts for students who are meeting or exceeding proficiency. We've outperformed the state and West Hartford in all of the demographics. And then compared to Fairfield, we outperformed in 4 of the 6. New Canaan and Darien did outperform us for now. But they do serve to, half or more than half the amount of students that we have. So we're really, really working hard and doing a good job for all of our groups. And then looking at SAT on the next page for our grade 11. This one gets tricky, there's a lot of asterisks. The state will hide the data if it would in any way identify who the students are. So it gets a little harder at 11th grade because it's only 1 grade of students. So when the groups are so small, they don't share that information wide. We did outperform the state though in the 3 demographic groups that we could compare, and we outperformed West Hartford and Fairfield in 2 of the 3 that we could compare. And we're going to get that New Canaan and Darien next year. Come back to that. And the last highlight I would like to make is improvements that we're making in our MTSS pathways through literacy assessments and making sure we're intervening early and often, if you will. It's not a track. Sometimes people think of it as a track. MTSS is not a track. It's that we've identified a need and we're going to help fill that gap and get you underway. So we started kind of with a phased approach. Last year we did some work on what results in STAR, as well as some other classroom data could tell us, and then we moved that from those indicators of literacy specialists to take a closer look. And what we were able to add in this year is then we still have the STAR, which we already have, and then we have running records, which we've already been doing, but we place them into this system. So you can kind of look at a STAR, which is computer-based, a one-on-one assessment with your actual teacher to see where you are, and in comparing those pieces, we could look at, okay, should we go further into a deeper assessment with a specialist who knows how to do that, and then make decisions on what kind of interventions, assistance, help, support we could give. And it's been going pretty well for the year.
Thank you. Just discussion, I've got a quick question for you. You mentioned the Wilson Foundations program, and I know it's in here as Wilson Foundations curriculum in several spots. How long has that been with us? How's it going?
Fabulously.
How long have we had it?
So, so last year, so the year before last year, we had 4 schools who had it at some grades between K and 2. It wasn't standard, it wasn't like all K, if that makes sense. So last year, I was able to, in those 4 schools, make them whole. So all 4 of those schools all had K 1 and 2 for the first time. So this will be the first year coming from those 4 schools coming at the end of this year, we can see some real data because now we have a set of kids who at a minimum have gone through 2 grade levels, right, one to the next. This year, we also went kindergarten across the district. So all of kindergarten in every school has 30 minutes a day of these early literacy teaching. It's very scientific. It is also based in Orton-Gillingham, which we're already doing in our district. This puts it in a very explicit and systematic pattern through the science of knowing how students should be exposed to, play around with, and then really master every single little component of early literacy. The feedback is good. From teachers, principals, I've heard from some parents actually as well. We had last year, at the end of last year, we did the whole group training for kindergarten, mandatory. You have to, like, Wilson Foundations, because of how scientific their program is, they have very strict requirements about how you're allowed to proceed, and it begins with training. Last year, we were able to get 3 of our own literacy specialists certified to be Wilson Foundations trainers, so we no longer have to pay Wilson. We have our own, yeah, so we have 1 for K, 1 for 1, and 1 for 2, but they are actually able to do all 3, but we did talk about just, getting specific into your level as well. So this year, with kindergarten being wide, the coach or the literacy specialist, who is now also facilitator specific to kindergarten, rotates through our district every Monday to visit with the teachers, to go into their classrooms, to answer any questions, to work with the principals if they want it, in addition to all the other supports that we're providing. But in response to last year's training, you know how we had that 1 extra day at the end of last year in our calendar, so we held that introductory workshop, and I tried really hard to make it festive, because, it's just not really the day. But I also knew it was a luau thing. Hula skirts and all. The teachers, came in, as I would have as well, kind of like what they was over with, but I also know you want to put your hands on those materials. It's new in some fashion. Even if people have done it perhaps in another district, we have the very newest edition and all of those pieces. So the training had to happen, and from every person there, it was positive feedback. I didn't want to be here, but now I'm so excited about this. Thank you for doing this. Can we pick up our student materials tomorrow? No, they're going to be your school, because they're very heavy and there's lots of boxes. But it's been very good. I have principals saying things like, I've never seen our students grow this quickly in all my years here. I have teachers saying that they use like an early literacy assessment. This was last year when they got them all at those 4 schools. They used an early literacy assessment in September as the baseline, and reassessed yesterday, back then. And every single student had grown in her class at one of our Title I schools. Every single kid. And now we're seeing the similar results in all of our schools. So we did a lot of research before we made the decision to go wide. New Canaan dared to do it K-3. But because there is an initial fear, right, that it's not exactly right for every student. But what we're finding is it is. There is a component that lasts for about 3 to 5 minutes. Well, I'd say in kindergarten, 30 seconds to 3 minutes, and then we scale up. But that is the same way for every kid. But it's all the other components that happen in that 30 minutes is where you can get your differentiation, personalization, and exactly what they need. So first year is always harder because it's new, no matter how long you've been teaching. But I've also received a lot of feedback about thanks for the Mondays, thanks for this, and on some of those Wednesdays that we have built into the calendar, we're able to get the team back together, even just for like Q&A, not necessarily in a set schedule, just let's talk about it, where are you, what are you needing, what do you want me?
Ms. Deacon.
The Wilson program sounds fantastic. I'm really excited, encouraged, and I believe in it. And thank you for explaining why it's going to be a game changer.
Yeah.
Now I'm worried about the kids that will have missed it in the K-1-2 era.
Yes.
So I was looking back through about 3 or 4 years of data for the percentages of students at levels 1 and 2. It's remarkably consistent year to year to year to year. So my question is, how are we involving the parents in bringing up more quickly the ability of students to reach level 3? Because I don't see another way to do it we can't start them again in kindergarten and accelerate them, right? So what are you doing for family involvement, sharing data, and making the family part of the improvement plan?
So I'd like to preface with saying, each school could answer to this more succinctly than I said, but I can tell you some of what I'm hearing and some of the feedback I'm getting from other teachers in the schools as well as families, which is that it's spreading. The idea, the concept of how to teach early literacy in these ways is spreading. We have a couple of schools actually, for example, a handwriting issue has come up, but the students are in 5th grade. And so what we're able to do is we actually have some resources in foundations that are extra, extension, other pieces. So when we purchase, right, so right now we're at K at all the schools, but K2 at some of our schools, we get access to everything. So we actually have access online, online all the way to the 3rd grade materials, and then interventions that exist for 3rd grade, knowing that you could be looking at students who are a few years above. So we're actually able to take some of those materials and they're using them in those what I need now blocks or advisories or whatever they're calling them, but those chunks of time that they've worked into their schedules at elementary, they're using the specialist or the classroom teachers are then grouping up the kiddos by all their different needs. So they might not be their students, but they all have this similar need and they're tackling that one at a time. So for now, it's really still an improvement to what we had before. Yeah.
Ms. Olson, I don't know if you had any. Oh, go ahead.
Just because it's related to what just to understand a little better, is it something they access online through their iPads, or is this all paper text? How does the community, is it, I know that brain development early literacy is, in kindergarten is the focus. I guess I'm sort of not surprised that 5th graders may be having trouble with handwriting, and I'm excited about what I'm hearing about Wilson, but I just want to understand a little bit better. Is it something that they're doing, accessing on iPads? Is it screen time? Is it completely not that? Can you kind of explain that part to me too?
Yeah, so actually it's grounded solely in the idea of being kinesthetic. So the kids are moving all of their body parts, standing, sitting, moving. Their favorite thing to do is, I always call it spray paint, but that's not right. But they have to put their arms out and they're like imagining that they're writing and they get to pick the glitter color that's imaginary but no screen time for this, no screen time. This is not, sorry, the online parts are for the teacher only.
It's very tactile and there's a lot of components to the program.
Like, I agree with Ms. Dayton, like, let's, it needs to spread because I think that I'm excited that we are taking a step towards brain development early literacy, not necessarily just downloading apps for kindergartners. This is exciting, so thank you.
Yeah, definitely.
There's even a hand puppet that the teacher uses.
Oh, there's a hand puppet for the teacher and a miniature component for the children, and they will do anything to get to use the puppet.
Miss Dowd. Here you go with that.
Can you explain to me now what middle school writable is?
Oh, I would love to.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so middle school writable is a platform, I guess is the best way to say it, an online platform. But what our goals are with this platform, I'll tell you their goals and I'll tell you our goals. Okay. So they built this program. It was actually, they were educators and now this is taken on their whole life. But they built this because there's a big gap for writing in the secondary space, as well as effective feedback, which we know is the #1 indicator about how kids will improve. So that they were trying to fill that gap as educators. So the platform itself, the first things that you see and that the teachers are already very excited about is that students within this one platform can do all kinds of writing assignments, writing practice, reading practice, and all of these things that could be assigned by your teacher and collected. So that's a big plus for me because I would like to see us moving towards digital portfolios. And so this will provide us that capability. we are looking at, in the assessment pieces you would have seen in the report too, about some district-wide submissions at certain grades. Right now we're focusing on middle school. It grew out of a need for placement between 8th and 9th grade. I'm trying to make sure we're doing what's best for the students while we make such a big transition. So we had a little pre-phase last year where the 8th grade teachers in schools decided they were willing to give this a try. So we did one standard writing assignment at 8th grade and did it old school, where then I brought in all the teachers and the high school teachers, and we, with highlighters, scored these papers, and every paper was scored 3 times. So it was a lot of trees and highlighting, but it went really well. And so to me, it was like, let's just keep it going, but let's do it digitally instead of print. So what we're going to be able to do with this system is, 1, the portfolio. 2, it can be a practice of activities in SBA style, which is also a gap for us right now. We're teaching reading, we're teaching writing, we're doing the practice, we're doing all of these things, but we don't have quite enough exposure to the lingo, if you will. The way they ask it on SBA is not something we have our hands on, and this program gives us that. So instead of, you'll hear at middle school a lot, like theme, the main idea. We teach that, the kids master with us, we assess it in these authentic ways, and we make sure that they can do it in all these different genres and all these things that we are like, they've got this. Right. But then the SBA is a multiple choice of some fashion, right? So you're looking at how they ask the question, which sometimes they won't even use the word being. The kids just supposed to figure out that's what they meant. Mm-hmm. And then you have 4 multiple choices, right? 2 of which look right. Mm-hmm. So how do you decide? So it's kind of like learning for the real world, but also being prepped to get that test out of the way.
Yeah. I like that.
Yeah. So it gives us that, and then the feedback is excellent. The feedback between students, between teachers and groups of students, between teachers and students, even speaking to students across the district. Like you can have Western talking to Central, who's talking to Eastern on these channels, and it's a big component of making sure that it's appropriate, safe, helpful, all those things. It's also an issue when you're talking about adolescents trying to give feedback to others.
Can I ask a follow-up question? When you said for placement, so are you talking about like 113A and things like that? Is that what you're talking about?
No.
Okay.
112, 113. And helping students and parents too decide which one of these is better for me.
Got it.
In the past, there has been a component of using kind of like big work, but we didn't have necessarily the same big work at each school. So it was hard to compare, to make sure we're being consistent and those the pieces, and also because we do have parents and kids who come in and say, this is what I think, they're like, what do you think? And this gave us like a standard way to say, this was a task. We still use all kinds of other things.
That was an ask of the teachers. The teachers brought that to us too, so it wasn't us doing it to them. This is what they generated after the yearly assessment.
Yeah.
So I wanted to start with a really big thank you. I really liked the goals, the clarity of the goals. I really liked the report in general. I thought it was really great. Keep that in mind. I just have a couple little things. Really keep that in mind. No, but there was a couple little spots where I really, again, loved a lot of this. But a couple things, just remember, like if you're giving us a number, it's always great to have some feedback with it. So like 85% goal, and then you said 33 need to shift. I'm like, oh, that's great to know. But I thought, ooh, out of how many? Like, okay, so I'm thinking, let me calculate back. I think this is supposed to be 11th graders, so is it all the 11th graders? So just always to think about, if you're giving a number, so the goal of 85% of students, and I forget which one it was, but we'll
my goal pages.
Yeah. So it's 85% of students I think will shift from this to that. Maybe it's to get to the 3 to 4 range. I forget what it was.
So be proficient.
Yeah, be proficient. Is it the SAT one? I forget what it is.
Is it like page 6 and 7?
Hold on.
Which were these 2
I have the ends on 6 and 7, but I'm thinking maybe it was somewhere else.
It's 85. So on the bottom of page 5, it says 85% of students in grade 11, yes. About 33 more students will achieve proficiency. So I'm just like thinking, okay, are we talking about then, is that 33 out of all 11th grade, or what is your group? Right, so it's just, I kind of figured that, and then I'm thinking, okay, I know about how many kids we have of like, right over 680 or something, but, you know, it's always great if you can just say 33 out of something, because it just makes it that much, you know, clearer as you're looking through it, okay, what are we talking about in terms of that kind of thing?
Yeah,
Similarly.
Before you move off, the answer to that question is what? It's 33 of the 11th graders taking, which grade taking?
Yeah, so
the
it
data
would
you
be
provided
that
here was
this year we had,
683 kids?
yeah, so this year we had, I'm just gonna make the numbers sort of digging, but you know,
Yeah,
this year, let's say we had 700 students, and it would be that next year we'd be looking at, if they were the same, we'd be looking at 733. It's just a little bit easier to think with the teachers too, to say, we know the numbers are going to change about how many kids, but if I said to you, especially just 11th grade, that's one grade, look, we're looking for 33 more students, like, could you say, you know what, I can help that kid, and I can help that kid, and it just puts it in a little bit more of a realistic perspective for them.
And then similarly, table 3.8, it was nice to see those numbers, but I kind of was like, well, I have no idea, like, is this good, is it not good, what are we comparing to, what did we have last year? So that's just sort of another spot where I thought it would be nice just to have some reference for that.
Yeah, I actually completely agree with you. I was able to pull this information, and I may have been able to do it in the past, but I never saw the functionality. STAR's dashboard for us as administrators and teachers got an update over the summer. So that may, just so you know, but I totally agree. That's why I'm hoping next year, right, we can start seeing cohorts.
And then, oh, sorry, one more can I do? The 30-minute literacy block, is that new? And if so, kind of where is that time coming from? What, you know, I've heard about changes in elementary school and block things and so forth, but I don't feel like I've gotten a real clear picture of that.
So we were trying to really kind of straighten out perhaps semantics in making that statement. We worked with the principals knowing that Foundations was coming up this year everywhere. So in the past, the schools, when they make their schedules, they may block, you know, 90 minutes or 2 hours, and it's typically 2 hours. And in there, word study would occur. And what my ask was, can we denote the 30 minutes? Like, these are the 30 minutes that we commit to do this early literacy work every day, and that it would never get lost in the shuffle or any of those things. So it's not more time, it's just now labeled. Yeah, yeah.
Your enthusiasm is always infectious every time you come. It's so fun. Yeah. Thank you for coming, because it's one of the better, it's one of the more informative and helpful sessions. So the report was great. I'm going to give you two things that are totally unrelated.
Okay.
One is, and maybe this is the, you know, I'm like a broken record. Everybody will groan when I say this. I don't like getting a humanities report. And the reason is it's two big subjects. And this thing is largely devoid of discussion about what we used to call social studies. So I was just wondering why that is. Because, by the way, I'd love to talk about that separately. I'd love to do what we're doing right now, which is this deep dive on Essentials English Language Arts, as opposed to the other half of humanities. So
I hear you. I know what you're saying.
Okay.
I think that when looking at K2 and then 3A and then 11th grade, just the data we can pull, it's always technically called ELA, but we do a lot in our courses, and they did before I got here, so this is, I mean, you can thank me, but it was happening before. But there's a lot of combination between, there's a lot of collaboration between ELA and social studies, especially once we hit secondary and they are completely separate.
Right.
All of our middle schools and so much at our high school, they do so much work to make sure that they're also like making the connections for the kids or helping them see the connection between the two. So we actually talked, I was with Lucy and Bridget the other day and we were looking through this, and I talked about how the biggest numbers in AP scores are all social studies. And that it's typically not seen as a tested area, but we know that it all goes together. It all is going to come back to reading and writing, especially SAT, which is actually, they do reading and writing on social studies topics, but they still just call it kind of the ELA test. But I just feel like that growth in those AP numbers, the amount of tests they're giving, but also that the scores are going up, is a true testament to social studies all the way down into elementary.
What would be helpful, or, I don't know how to do this, I'll just make a suggestion, is maybe as a written report at another time. I mean, we really need to go back and look at our agenda plan, but what would be helpful would be, you provided so many helpful insights, which is, I like this report because it's much more distilled. We used to get, 90 pages but it was lots of data, but not enough insight. It's missing that. This report does a great job with that. It would be helpful, even if it were a couple page memo, not a report that said, hey, here's the biggest, it's a little writing assignment for a middle school class, right? So it's homework. Insights and views on curricular issues, studies, content. Because these reports also tend to be, and I realize it's part of how we have measurements, so we ask a lot about measurements, we ask about achievement, but it tends to get a little over-rotated, and the important issues and the nuance aren't always in the numbers. They need to be described in a very literal way, not a numeric way. So anyway, I just wanted to ask you about that, and then maybe I'll make a suggestion about that. The last thing I wanted to ask you about, which as I say is totally unrelated, is maybe Irene can help with this. At the elementary school, at the elementary levels, K through 5, we've only got so many hours in the day, so it needs to be divided among subjects. So my question would be, let's pick 2 years ago. I think you joined 2 years ago. If you could, I don't know if it's the same per grade, what is the hour per day that is given as a standard, a minimum standard to elementary schools of what they are supposed to spend on, I'm going to use the old language, English? And then what is that number this year?
We don't set that. The state doesn't set
No,
that.
not the state. I'm asking you guys in Havemeyer setting those standards to the schools.
We provided guidance, so we brought the leadership team, the elementary leadership team together, and because we calculated how many hours, how many instructional minutes do we have in a day.
Six in a
It's
day.
450 minutes.
Right.
But when you add all the other things in, including truth transition, arrival, departure, all things, right?
It's reduced.
You take away, you keep taking away, right? So what the principals asked from Lori, from all of our program coordinators, what is the research behind how many minutes should be committed to each area, including the arts, including ESL, plus, and so on. And again, you don't have enough time in the day. So we provided the guidance, and that was given to the principals to then help build their master schedule. So that's why master schedules will look somewhat different school to school, and then they're trying to manage that throughout the entire day. So I think it was almost 90 minutes.
Yeah, I could speak to, so one of the things we're actually trying to do at K-5 is actually build it as a humanities block. So reading, writing, social studies, concepts, things, ideas, all together.
With all the resources.
Yeah, we're in the second light year of trying to do that work. But it's in response to that same thing. There's not enough time. We're trying to get in, make sure that we have the appropriate amount of time at each level. So one thing that we did discuss specific to English for literacy was there was kind of this standard of 90 minutes. Kindergarten 90 minutes, fifth grade 90 minutes. But what kindergartners can do and what fifth graders are expected to do are two very different things. So just going with 90 minutes is an option, but there's just a lot more details to knowing about that time and knowing that K and 1, we need them to be moving, we need them to be moving. So we've actually, Amy, is it Dina Cola? Pre-K coordinator. We actually talk a lot about what they do in pre-K and what that means for kinder, and then so what her groups are doing and what would be the next rational step in kindergarten. Some of the confusion was coming from, that's why I say kind of like semantics, that if the literacy block meant that it had to be workshop. Well, 90 minutes of workshop for a 5-year-old is not appropriate, right? So we've started the conversation of talking about if it's 90 minutes, if we keep 90 minutes, but what does that look like? And let's take off no one can really pinpoint where the directive came from, so I'm not sure it's a directive, but the idea
What directive are you talking
that
about?
it would be workshop, that 90 minutes of teachers college workshop, whether you're 5 or you're 15, So we're trying to talk about English time, maybe 90 minutes, but what does that look like? What are the components that are workshop? What are the components that are play with literacy? What are components of guided reading, shared reading, balance, all of those things that should happen, and then it's not just teachers college workshop in those minutes.
Wow, I didn't know I was gonna, by the way, everything you just said makes total sense to me.
Okay.
But, and I'm glad you're thinking, hopefully you're thinking about all that stuff at that level all the time, which is what you're doing, so great. So I'm wondering what you can do is, if you have a guideline, I don't want you to rewrite it. Whatever the guideline is, however you packaged it and presented it, probably more Irene, right? Because I have to imagine, I have a famous saying, if everything's priority, nothing's priority. So, and there's a natural tension, I imagine you as a ELA, hey, I want as much time as possible on my thing, right? And by the way, the math coordinator's doing the same thing, and the arts coordinator's doing it. It's totally natural, right? That's why Irene is there, to kind of sort that out, right? So the question I have is, could someone follow up and send us whatever was the guideline that was sent?
Yes, through Tony.
However you do it.
You can do it as an addendum to this report, or certainly through Tony with Dr. Jones, we can send that.
Okay.
Which is just, it's nice to know what the guideline is, but also to know what's actually happening, since it sounds like that's sort of a building level decision, and it may not.
Because again, they will look different. Each building looks different based on the needs there and the enrollment of the school.
So I'm also assuming that the needs of the ALP students and their program is also a standalone, that they will meet the needs of their ALP students.
You forgot to say how wonderful the report was.
I was, and I do, just gotta give me a chance, because I like the K-1-2 data. For years I asked for it, they said, oh, they don't have it.
When I saw that platform, I was like,
Yeah, I think it solves a lot of problems down the road. It is.
Don't have anything till 3rd grade, and there's a long time and a lot of work there.
And a lot of problems develop that you don't know about, right? So the other thing is that we all know that assessment drives instruction. So I'm looking at these really great numbers of students, 50% or somewhere between 40 and 50% at level 4 on the SBA, and also many of our kids top out on the STAR test. So I'm wondering how we really find out the ability of some of our top learners. What are we doing to assess that so that we then can provide the appropriate instruction?
So in the pathway that we talked about, that we just do with all students, the STAR plus the running record, that's where the running record comes in. There has been a past practice, but it is no longer true, that at every grade, there was like a cap that once a student read up to a level. Well, we can't do that because of exactly what you just said. And we also know that the assessment we give in running records, whatever platform we use, that will never ride the line of the content being inappropriate, which that's a different topic that, because a student reads at an X, does not mean they should be reading X books, you know. But we know in our assessment, because of the way it's created, that we don't have to worry about the content problems.
Right.
So there's no reason to cap that one-on-one assessment. So that's where we really get a lot more personal information from every student, because they all take that assessment.
And who does the running records for the ALP students?
So in the past, it's been a mix, and it's presently a mix. We're working on that. Bonnie and Irene talk about that a lot, actually. Because one thing that comes up, it's kind of like both sides of the coin. The ALP teacher at K-5, right, will do their reading part of their instruction, but the general ed teacher does the writing part and has the student for all the rest of the day. So it's like, how do we find the right match to, that both of those educators knows exactly what that student needs.
And one last question. Are we doing any training? I notice all the training is also intervention, it's also at the lower level. Are we training the teachers how to use those materials you say that are out there for the kids that are above level?
Yeah, actually, so I want to go to my list so I don't forget. I can't remember. So in November, actually, on our next big day, I have 3 educator experts actually coming in for that very reason. One is coming from the University of California to do argument and rhetoric. She's an expert in the high school pre-college pace, but I talked with her about, the advanced learners and these things that we have, and she said absolutely, like, bring those teachers in. We have another one that is some very current new research on early literacy and how the brain works in acquiring language. He will be, or actually there's 2 of them. Those 2 scientists, educators, will be coming in on that day. And we also have another presenter educator. He's actually still in the classroom, so I think we might be paying for his sub that day. But he's going to come in. He has a whole new component on the art of comprehension. And the whole idea is that it spans the entire gamut of the art behind understanding. And I mean that kind of in both ways, actual art on the paper and also the art and science.
I just want to compliment you on your very logical and strategic approach to curriculum. You seem to have a path, you know where you're going, and it's very organized and it's very impressive, so thank you.
Thank you.
So actually, one quick comment just from what you'd said. My son learned great writing skills in ALP. In fact, I think it was the best writing instruction he got was in like 3rd and 4th grade, from his whole through 12th grade from ALP. So I'm interested to hear that it doesn't seem like it's happening, because that seems like a change. The other thing I wanted to say, though, in terms of the higher end students, if you look starting at the data for the SBA 6th, 7th, 8th, and 9th grade, 8th and 9th grade students.
I put, what grade they are now, and then their test from last year.
Right. Well, actually what's great is you show it for, let's say, the 7th, you show it 3 through 6.
Yeah.
And all of those cases, consistently, every grade, the level 4 percentages are going down.
Mm-hmm.
So, I feel like we're not keeping those students where they were when they were in 3rd grade. So our numbers overall may be getting better, and our 3rd and 4th grade, our 3rd and 4th level mixed is sort of staying stable, but we're losing them out of the 4th level. So I do feel like we want to make sure we're paying attention to how we keep our level 4 kids at level 4.
Mm-hmm. We have, I would say too, our middle school teachers recognize that in spades, and they're asking for any kind of professional development I can get them and all those things. So, that's half the battle.
Right, but this is also 3, 4, 5.
It is, and I have talked with, so what's typical when we switched tests, CMT, when we switched from CMT over to SBA, whatever the 2 tests would have been, you traditionally see the first year, scores aren't good. 2nd year, a little bit better maybe, and then by the 3rd year you start picking up pace, and then around the 5th or 6th year they changed the schematics in the test. In Connecticut, for the SBA, we don't get to see the tests. Some other states you get to see your tests. So when you say, wow, why did that go down? You can see the test, the questions, how they were asked, how your students scored on them, why, and then start doing your professional judgment about why they may have done that. So it's a little harder here to pull that, but the information and the goals even about those targets that we're going to hit specifically, I've been able to have some very specific conversations with teachers and schools too about, we know this as a whole for the district, but where are you? Where are your kids sitting? And I can tell you, we didn't have those conversations last year. I was still kind of getting here, I guess. It's been very positively received, and it's also coming at me. It's not just me coming at them. So I just really think that's important, and we'll keep working on that information. Yeah.
I'm going to echo what Gaetan said. I mean, I need a lot more information, but just, I don't know where the other board members are, but I have a sense in conversations with certain board members that we're all of a generally like mind. I think for different reasons, be it we see tracking as an opportunity for personalized learning, we think grouping is a good idea generally, whatever the reason may be, and I think different board members probably have different reasons. But my sense is there's a clear consensus that ALP at the elementary level is an exceptionally strong program, and it's exceptionally strong when it's pull-out. Okay, and there's a lot of reasons why. And, you know, you could have the debate endlessly about this. It's good, it's bad. You know, some people say, well, wait a second, if I take kids out, it relieves pressure on the teacher for the remaining students. There's just all kinds of different reasons. I want to highlight this to you because now you're like in your third year here, so you know you probably know where the bathroom is by now, right? Yeah. But to tell you this in the first year was probably not particularly helpful. And you talked about that, you know, that writing is now done not necessarily in the ALP classroom, it's done. I'm going to ask the board later when we get our new board, you know, really to dig deep on ALP, because it sends to me there's been this long-standing tug by educators of, I want to push that program in. I want to dilute pullout. And until somebody can explain to me why that is vastly better than what we're doing now, I'm concerned. I mean, we're not talking about the third leg of the ALP program, which I was shocked to learn has someone just made a unilateral decision to push that into the classroom. That as far as I'm aware, the board never discussed or never approved. But I would just highlight that to you because I feel very strongly, and maybe others do too, I don't know, that in ELA ALP, we can't slide down that road of taking part of the program. I appreciate coordination, but I don't want that to slide into, oh no, we've diluted it and pushed it into the classroom. I just want to highlight that because it came up, and if I didn't signal it, you'd have no idea to the degree that it mattered. What I felt about it or what other board members felt about it. They may want to echo this or not. But that's a very strong program. It's paid off exceptionally well. I think it's a major driver in why kids, when they get around to high school, why we have so many children at the top that they're taking full advantage. They've ridden this wave of ability to perform at that level, and this program has been central in making that possible when you get all the way out to grade 11 and 12. It's a very connected thing, and if you're a parent of a kid, I had one kid who did not go through that. I had another child who went through all three aspects of it, and they wound up graduating with 11 APs. So, and I bet you there's some people maybe here on the board who could tell, I'm sure Ms. Dayton could tell you the same story, and Dr. Francis could tell you the same story. So I just wanted to kind of put that stake in the ground and highlight that and overemphasize it.
Okay.
So you're passing the mic just to know the ALP science is on the agenda for November 25th.
So I had a different question, but I will absolutely echo that to me, ALP was not only an absolute gem, it was really a savior for my kids, because when they were not in ALP in elementary school, school was difficult. And so having that appropriate challenge level, was an absolute gift. And I don't think I would have kept my kids in the public schools if we hadn't had it. And I worry about really those advanced students who can't afford to go to private schools if we don't continue to have a strong out program or figure out something, because it was a fantastic experience for my kids. But my actual reason for grabbing the microphone was I did want to go back to social studies. And I can't remember the timing now, but we had 2 or 3 years ago, so maybe when you were here or maybe right before, some discussions about the social studies curriculum at the high school and sort of what classes we had at the high school and whether it was appropriate to think about new classes or changes in classes. And I know there was sort of a hold put on that, but I do feel like, yeah, so, right, so.
The frameworks were coming online with the department,
So other things going on, but I do think, to bring back and to flesh out some of those questions, to make sure we feel like we have the appropriate choices there, that we're covering whatever, social studies is not my thing, but I do want to make sure that we're really providing a really rich experience for our students with that, and that we do at some point kind of come back to that question because there had been some issues raised, and I just don't want that to get dropped.
So the curriculum management plan, that new cycle that was presented, social studies is first, and as of right now, we still have to talk about some revisions based on some of the board questions, but social studies would come to you, I think, 2022, 23. Wow. Having all of that, again, it's based on. Oh my God. 22.
This is why I said we need to find a way to do this stuff.
Ms. Dave.
I was just going to follow up to that too, that the reason that we looked at that year is because we had a new legislature that just hit for African American studies and the Latino studies. I was actually with the state earlier this morning about those courses, and right now the directive is that the curriculum will be created by the state and then required. Yeah, that's how I feel about it too right now. So we're waiting to.
I think we all on the same page. So
yeah, we're waiting to. I came from Texas, which that's how everything is in Texas. So I really like it here, and I didn't. But so that being said, we did like specifically align it so that it is 22, and that's because that's when that legislation hits. We do already have some courses on the books that, due to low enrollment, haven't been occurring in the recent history. And so Lucy and her team have already gone back to look at what that was. But then as soon as we found out, we only found that out 1 week ago, that we actually most likely are not even going to have the option.
How many course credits?
1 credit. There were 2 bills, and the only way they could get them passed is they combined them. So it became essentially a half credit of African American studies and a half credit of Latinx studies. And it's going to be a required 1 credit. It is an elective, but yeah, we were on it. We were talking about courses we used to have, things we know the kids want now. They had already surveyed some of the students to say this is kind of coming, like what do you think about this? And we just had to break it.
So much stuff goes in a 5-pound bag.
Yes.
Ms. Dave.
I'm not sure everyone in the room is aware that Greenwich led the way for the entire state of Connecticut to have identification of gifted children, and to backpedal or do anything at all that would diminish the OUT program would be heresy. We passed that legislation. I was there on the day that it passed, and I can tell you that without Greenwich, you would not have that ability to recognize students of special abilities in all of our schools in Connecticut. So I echo what has been said, and I wanted to put a punctuation point on it.
And if you're looking for volunteers to help reevaluate that program, reinvigorate that program, I know somebody that's going to have some free time in November. Not volunteering someone so much as suggesting. Are other discussion on this? Dr. Frank.
Sorry.
That's why we're here. That's why we're here.
I was just, I think this is small.
You're the one who set this agenda, and
And we said we wanted to leave plenty of time because it was 2 topics in one. But this is a really quick question. I was just really surprised to see that there's not enough data in our schools for 11th grade high need students. Are those high need, are just a lot of those kids not taking the SAT? How could that be?
Wait, what?
11th grade.
The numbers are low.
No, it's a little star, there's an asterisk.
Oh, that subgroup would have been so small that the state hid the number.
But how is it that,
It's 40 or less, but right at the end.
So-
The data is suppressed by the State Department of Ed because our learner group is so small.
I understand, but high needs in general in our district is pretty
So-
high. So does that mean that most of them?
To use of those 3 categories.
So when we get like, a high needs, you know the charts that were in the achievement report that Irene presented, how we have like the SBA or SAT and all of the results, and then we have and then we have non-high need students, and then we have high need students. That's been compacted to give us those numbers. When I broke it out like this, it becomes hidden data because the sets of student are so small.
Oh, I see level
but
3.
that's the gig time.
That's because they pulled the data from the state data set. We actually have this data. We have this data in our ECRIS system on our own. So if we wanted to look at it, we don't care what the state did, we could have published this number if we so chose.
Yes.
Because we have the data in our own data systems.
I just kind of mirrored the.
Yeah, you got what you got from the state. It's fine.
No, I
It's
mean,
totally
not
fine.
the same reason they're
Right.
not putting an asterisk on it.
Right.
I just assumed that would be most appropriate
Right,
for our
right,
students as well,
right.
even in this.
But the answer is, Gaetan, if we wanted it, if you want it, you can request it, and we have it.
It's different. You're saying that we have fewer than 40 high need students in 11th grade?
Double check the N.
Their N threshold is pretty high, which is weird. It's not
I
normal
think it's
statistics.
low, but-
And Darien has enough high need students in 11th grade? And, I mean, I guess part of the question I have is, are they not taking the SAT? Because we
No,
certainly
no.
our participation rate is very high.
Yes.
even in our high need
100%,
students.
yes.
They don't delineate between high needs and not high needs, they just say, these are how many 11th graders you have, and these are how many kids took the test. And we're at like 98%.
Rick is chasing kids down.
I understand, I'm just saying
It is an
it's.
important point, and we did check the actual stuff. Like, we did check how many students do we have, how many are taking the test, and it's very high.
Right, but the reality is you have this data, you can utilize this data, you're just not making it public. That's the
Do
punchline.
you want the data? That's the question. Do you want the data?
I don't know what you'd need it for that they couldn't use it.
If you want it, ask for it. If you don't need it and you have enough.
Okay, if there's no other discussion on this item,
There was a question on.
Megan.
Yeah.
Sorry, we gotta get the microphone.
Okay. Am I mic?
Your mic.
Thank you, Lori, so much. You're extremely knowledgeable, and I really appreciate it. Echoing what everybody else said in terms of following along and having a strong understanding and easy to read graphs, et cetera. Very much appreciate it. My question is, first of all, kudos to the social studies for getting high AP exams and more students taking it. We have open enrollment for AP at the high school, is that correct or no?
Yes, that is correct.
So I guess my question is,
sometimes there is an assessment, but we also have our override policies.
Right, there might be some prerequisites identified in the course of study guide.
But I do know that Lucy and Bridget in particular will meet with students and families who want to talk more extensively about that.
Okay, yes, because this is where I feel like, this is where I see the system is a little bit backwards, because we have open enrollment and we have more students taking the AP exam and more students scoring high on social studies and history exams, which is not one of the ones that we track at the earlier age. So this is where I probably don't have the same popular viewpoint as others, but I do have the lens into elementary school, and I've seen Like they used to do rotations at the elementary school level, which is very helpful for students going around traveling to different teachers for middle school readiness for transition. And they're no longer able to do that a lot of times because what they were doing is having the strongest teacher in each subject be teaching that particular subject, which is a benefit to everybody. And they've had to do away with that at certain elementary schools because of the out pull-out. So there are definitely some detrimental things, but in terms of the mindset of a elementary school, which I know you understand is learning and growing, I find it really strange that by the time you get to high school, there's more of an opportunity to sort of branch out and take those, off into something, whereas we track at an earlier age when people are just developing that just beginning. So and they're more eager to try something different. So I definitely have, I've seen a lot. I have to strongly disagree with Mr. Sharon. I don't mind being the non-popular viewpoint, but done a great deal of research on this, and it's not necessarily beneficial for all. But I do want to say thank you, and just seeing the social studies scores sort of reminded me of one way that it does work to sort of allow all students to achieve at a high level and really, and there are some inconsistencies as well within this goal, so I know that's been touched on before, but it's, I appreciate I definitely very much appreciate you laying it out this way, and I saw some correlations that make sense there, so thank you.
If there's no other discussion, we will move on to our next item. Thank you very much. We appreciate it. All right, so our next item is the discussion policy.
All right, so we have our first read policies. I think I pointed out that for the transportation policy, what we had done was replace the CABE recommended policy. They're very similar. They cover the same sections and ideas, but instead of trying to take their policy and just edit it so it matched ours, we just took our literally what used to be the procedure, put it in there and kept all the stuff that we thought was policy level, and then the rest can go into regulation. What that does, to foreshadow into the next, is it covers that mileage thing that we had talked about, so that's now in this policy. So it is policy level, it's just not in that more general one that we have in our second reads.
So when I was mentioning to add it, I was actually at a lunch today and it reminded me that can we consider changing the miles and what it might mean to us as a district? I'm sure from a cost perspective that's going to be the biggest impact. Times have changed. I used to walk to the high school from the bottom of the avenue. I wouldn't do that today. I wouldn't take an hour of my time to walk to and from school. So I think we really need to look at it, and specifically with traffic around the school at drop off and pick up. We might be able to do something with that congestion if more kids are on the bus, because they're not walking, they're getting dropped off, and they're not carpooling either. So I think we should really take a look at the miles. I would go so far to say is, a mile to a mile and a half for high school.
So I'm going to say here to that. We are just inside of we're just outside of the 2 mile limit. Oh, sorry. We're just outside of the 2 mile limit, and I do actually drive somebody to school with my son, but I don't drive to the school because I won't go anywhere near it. I don't even cross the post road, quite honestly, so I've got to walk. But I think it's worthy of considering whether this belongs in a policy or not. I hope the superintendent will start looking at what it would take to make incremental changes, whether there's a way to lessen that number, because it is problematic, a long distance.
And it was that way almost 40. I would say I graduated almost 40 years ago, and that's what it was 40 years ago. So believe me, times have changed.
So, yeah, times have changed, and now we're trying to get kids to be more active and to get kids to walk and so on and so forth. So that's one aspect. But I think a huge aspect of any change is the finances of it all. I think before we take up a lot of time talking about it, we got to decide whether this is where we want to put our money. Do we want to put our money in buses, or we want to put our money in instruction? So I'd say keep it as a policy, You can always change the policy, but I think it should be a policy so long as the board hasn't voted to do something else.
I have to agree that I think we should keep it in the policy, but I think it's always smart to analyze. So I'd love to see the analysis. I know it's going to have probably a huge financial implication, and then, it's going to be deciding between that and the stadium. So let's try to do the analysis at one point, but I imagine you could add that to, number 10 on your list. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, did you?
Oh, sorry, let me just say, we looked at this a little bit on start time, and even a very small change, as I recall, had a pretty big impact.
Yeah, but thank you for bringing that up. But at the same time, I remember busing started at 7 million, and by the time, with Bill McCursey, and by the time we were done, it was less than $1 million increase. I mean, the original, did you start time? It's going to cost you $9 million in additional transportation. I mean, it's kind of like this stadium thing, right? It starts at one number and it ends at another. Sometimes it goes up, sometimes it goes down. I want this in policy because, like it or not, I mean, I was having a conversation with the people at CAVE about policy the other day, right? Many districts have written that boards have to approve procedure, regulations that go with. We don't. Which means if the board doesn't make it clear, then it's up to somebody's discretion, potentially off the radar. Not taking anything away from our superintendent, but the board has to decide where it wants to be explicit and where it doesn't. I think it's actually remarkably helpful to be explicit because to some degree it takes pressure off the superintendent. The superintendent could say, I had to operate within these parameters. Candidly, I agree with you. I've had I call it my hypocrisy moment lately, where I find some of the people that I know who are most vociferous about plastic bags and straws, they happen to be the people pulling up in line in their Suburban to pick up their kid, idling away as they run them all over town or their Range Rover, which is, I don't even want to think what the carbon footprint of that is. And surprisingly, more of them than I'd like to say, friends of mine, live in a 10,000 square foot house instead of a 4,000 square foot house. So if you think sustainability is important, right, and I'm politically not, I don't know where some people are, Green New Deal or whatever, but you can't say you care about sustainability and meanwhile you're not enabling kids to ride on a bus, which is the most carbon friendly of the things. So some point you have to have your principles match your what have you. So if this costs more, reduces traffic, reduces carbon footprint, is more sustainable, and that's what the Greenwich community values, then I don't know why we're not saying, okay, go hire a traffic consultant, which unfortunately you have to do. We learned from start time. That's the only way to really get the real numbers. Otherwise, it's a spreadsheet guessed by an analyst who doesn't know what they're doing, because you have to reconfigure the routes. I'd love to see what it is if we took it from 2, let's just say at each level, we moved it down 25%, we moved it down 50%. How much more does it wind up costing us? And then we can have a serious conversation about, if I change the policy, here's the cost of changing my policy. But I would like to see this in policy, and candidly, I would like to, as Lauren suggested, I'd love to see real good numbers about how we could make a number of benefits to the high school, particularly, and middle schools. Middle schools are miserable too. By the way, I live in North Manus. I see a couple more, other works, a couple North Manus. The level of walking in the neighborhood has gone up dramatically. It's a really cool thing. So whatever those parents are doing, God bless them.
So you hit most of the points that I would want to hit. What I will say is, I think this is another discussion to try and get, whether it's the BET or the RTM or somebody in there early. This is something I think benefits the town, benefits the environment, all of those things. I would be very hesitant, and I also agree with Barbara, to take that money out of the money that's going to education. So I think this needs to be something where we pull in and we say, hey, you know, this is for the town. You know, I think it's a lot, goes back also to the dishwashers, and you know, we're gonna be decreasing the number of trays that are going into the dump, so this is sort of a town investment, you know, similar, you know, improving traffic, reducing, you know, greenhouse emissions, you know, all of those kinds of things. There's big benefits to doing that, but I feel like this is a town thing, and we should be having these conversations early with our BET and our RTM, and saying, listen, if you guys are on board with this, let us research it. But for us to go and spend a lot of time doing this, and then it turns out they're like, well, we're not gonna increase that number, no way. And we're like, well, we're not going to want to take it out of our education budget, then we've spun our wheels for something that I don't think is worth it. So I would say, so on a separate, as a policy person, I would say, let's accept this policy. Let's then start conversations with other members in the town, of the town government, and then let's figure out as a team, we can figure out ways to make this happen.
I'm cool with that.
Well, I serve on the budget committee, and so not all members are aware that we're already starting at a deficit. And if you value education, and we're looking at things like increasing the ratio in preschool, we're looking at, you know, where the achievement gap can be most impacted in the earliest years, we're looking at serious changes to education to come in as guidelines. This is a nice to have. It really, truly is. And until those buses are electrified, I'm not on board with this whole thing about putting more buses on the roads. So my advice is leave it in policy. Let's see how the budget develops. I won't be there. It's up to you guys. Please prioritize education. Thanks.
Are we talking about the other ones?
Yeah, well, we're still on the discussion policies, so.
No, I understand.
Anything else on the discussion policies?
There's another policy, the food services one.
Can you give me the number?
Yeah, I'm trying to get
You
my,
mean the food ones?
the food one, so it starts at 3542.
Yeah, but there's like,
There's several, and Gaetan, I copied you on an email for the benefit of the rest of the board. The Food Services Committee had put together some guiding principles that we wanted to see incorporated into policy, and somehow that didn't get into the policy governance team, but it's around, you know, nutrition, sustainability, to the degree, local sourcing, and there were some other, you know, types of things in there, so somehow we have to make that connection.
Well, what, should I just ask you exactly this point?
it's the
Yeah.
same, okay. So. Don't turn it off.
Okay, so my question was to you, Lauren, in that regard, because there are, you know, there's one that's food services, but there's actually, this is probably 10 pages of food policy when you add these 5 or 6 up. So I really had 2 questions, and maybe the policy committee can answer one and you can answer the other. These, where were these policies modeled from? Okay, so these are CABES out of the book? I mean, I'm sorry, it's called the base policy manual? Yeah, okay. And maybe it'd be helpful to see how they've been modified. And then the second part was, what was the consultation between your committee and the policy? That didn't happen. Okay, it seems to me, I mean, just a suggestion. I wouldn't be, well, okay, but it seems to me that I don't want to go proceed to second read. I don't know how to handle this. I don't want to proceed to second read until that task has actually been done. Because we had a whole committee we appointed as ad hoc. They've been studying food and nutrition issues and so on and so forth for at least a year. Am I wrong?
Right.
We got to get those 2 things linked.
Yeah, I mean, as a board, it's just, we have to figure out a better way to understand what each other is doing. And I know, like, all the minutes get posted, but they're all in different places. This has sort of been the thing that I would have loved to change in 4 years. because we're not mind readers, and I personally couldn't always go find stuff. I wanted it sort of sent to me, so I think just moving forward, a way to do a better job of communicating to one another, you know, what we're working on. Minutes, I'm not sure, I don't have a solution, but it's just an observation.
Well, I mean, I think one of the things that we've made clear in the policy committee is, you know, we bring these things forward and then whatever amount of time it takes. So, you know, this is basically the CABE policies and we can go from there. I sort of only was able, because I didn't see it till just recently, to sort of glance through the email that you had sent in terms of those comments. And what I was trying to get a sense of is if anybody else had any other input along those lines, because obviously ultimately it's the board's decision in terms of what we change or do with this. So any feedback I can get in terms of that would be helpful.
Yeah, but you as the chair of yours has to get with whoever the chair is of yours. I don't know if it's you or not. And that has to be a deliberate step before something is even presented to the board.
Absolutely.
We don't use the board to create that event. It should happen by committee chairs beforehand, before a committee chair says, let me send something on to the board for board consideration. I'm just suggesting that as a process going forward. That's the way we typically worked, and I think we should probably learn from this and do that in the future.
Just to clarify though, food services is not a committee of the board, it is a committee for the superintendent. So Lauren connecting with Gaetan probably was the right thing to happen there. And it still can happen. This is the first time we're taking these up for discussion. So these are a draft. This is the right time to be having this conversation. So, glad it happened. Comments on these policies? Nothing? All right. So they'll go back to PGC. Just taking note of the discussion tonight. And we will move on to our action items. So the first action item is policy. Dr. Francis.
So on the second reads, there was a couple of comments last time, but in fact, so one of them was putting the mileage in, but as I said, that got included. One of them was a comment which confused me completely because I drew a blank, which is about the New York State teachers comment things. That was completely my first round of policy for the fall mistake, which is we included the regulations, which we had not reviewed at all. So none of that was actually in the policy, so that's not an issue there, so that was accidentally included. And I think that might have been it for comments. So were there any?
Policy number 3524.1. Hazardous materials in schools, pesticide application.
Yep.
The new teacher's contract, if passed by the RTM, says that teachers in the area of application have to be notified by email. So keep your eye on whether or not the contract is passed, and that would have to come into this. I would put it the last sentence of the first paragraph.
On the policy under the district shall, it says, provide notice of planned pesticide application to students, parents, guardians, and employees in the manner required by law. So employees, teachers, it's there.
No, but law is different. They wanted it a specific way.
What?
By law is different than by teacher contract. So you can have a state law, you can have a local law.
But it's saying that they're going to be notified, and isn't that the issue, whether they're notified or not?
No, it's not enough, because they wanted to be notified by email. The teachers in the area.
Okay, I'll finish reading the rest of it. I didn't know it was issued. Utilizing websites, schools or district social media accounts, electronic mail notification, or alert systems.
Yeah.
Just take another look and maybe it'll cover it.
The other thing I was going to say is even if it's not specifically in here, it doesn't necessarily have to be in policy to mean that it's going to happen. So again, there's sort of that question of policy versus regulation. So, you know, because there's going to be things that might come up in contracts and we wouldn't necessarily want to have to redo our policy every time. As long as we're not contradicting it, it doesn't mean it can't happen. So we can certainly talk about it again at policy and see if that's something that we think makes sense to change.
Sounds good.
Mm-hmm.
No? All right, anything else, Dr. Chris?
Oh, except, I'm sorry, this is, right.
Because, sorry.
Go ahead, Megan.
I'm on. I just want to say thank you to policy and get Tom for spearheading policy because it is no small task and you actually put your all into it. So thank you for, the many, many, many hours and effort that goes into all this. Appreciate it.
But I'm sorry, I just realized that I was acting as if this was a first read. So this is a second read, so the question is, are we comfortable? And I just reread during the first bullet, and it does say, notifying all these ways. Now you're right, it says by law. If we want to if we want to specifically change that.
So another section of this, where it says a district shall establish a registry of parents, guardians, and staff who want to receive advance notice of all pesticide use and provide such notice as required by law. It also says that we must inform annually parents, guardians, and staff of the policy. I think this is pretty comprehensive.
Mr. Chair, well,
I'd like to vote on each one of these individually, rather than as a group.
we haven't moved it yet. Sorry. You want to do that?
Yeah, if you want me to make, I wanted to bring it up. You want me to make the motion now?
Yeah.
I move that the action item be amended to vote on policies 3516, 3520, 3524, 3532, 3534, and 3541 are voted on individually.
Actually, I don't think we need to make a motion to do that because there's no motion on the floor. We're going to withdraw that and you make the motion for the first one.
Whichever one you want to start with.
Okay. Here, I'll let you do it. You're the committee chair.
All right, I move to, for the board to pass policy 3516.4.
Second? Ms. Stowe. Any discussion on that one? Okay. All those in favor of passing 3516.4? Ms. Olson?
Aye.
Okay, that passes 8-0. Thank you.
I move to pass policy 3520.1.
Is there a second? Ms. O'Neill?
What are we doing with 3564?
I just passed it.
So that was one, sorry.
All right, so there's 3520, there's a motion on the floor for Dr. Francis, second for Ms. O'Neill. Any discussion? All right, all those in favor of 3520.1? Ms. Olson?
Aye.
That passes unanimously. Dr. Francis?
So can I ask a quick question? You didn't include 3520.11 as an individual one, 3524.1, 3534, so can I move those three together? So I move, is that intentional or?
Yeah, I never understood why we had a dot.
Oh, so,
We would do those together, but
oh, I see.
now they're separate, but okay.
Well, so what I was going to say is I move to approve a policy 3520.11, 3524.1, and 3534.
Did you get 3524 without the dot?
Should I? Yeah, can I just suggest you do it without, just do the batches without, the batched with the dot, just do it. Let's just do it, let's just go.
All right. So I made a motion, I haven't heard a second, so you want me to start over again? 3520.11.
Second.
Okay, so that's on the floor, 3520.11. Any discussion now? All those in favor of 3520.11?
Aye.
That passes unanimously. Thank you.
All
Next
right.
up.
So then I'm moving to pass 3524 and 3524.1.
Second from Mr. Chair. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor of 3524 and 3524.1?
Aye.
Mr. Chair? You're an aye. Again, unanimous. Thank you. You're not unanimous, Ms. Teaton? You're no?
No.
Ms. Teaton is a no. Passes 7-1. Thank you.
I move to accept policy 3532.
For a second, Ms. Stowe, any discussion? All those in favor of 3532? Ms. Olson? All right, that's unanimous, thank you. Ms. Teaton? I'm sorry, Ms. Dr. Thinking this way, thinking that way.
I move to approve policy 3534.
For a second, Ms. Stowe, any discussion? All those in favor? Mr. Chair? Anybody no? Mr. Chair, that passes 7-1. Thank you.
I move to approve policy 3541.
Your second. You did 3541. No, she did not.
I don't think so.
No, she's not in order.
All right. Ms. Stowe is the second. Any discussion on 3541?
Actually, before we move on,
Well, we've got a motion on the floor, Peter. All right, so 3541. Any discussion on 3541? All those in favor? 3541.
Aye.
All those opposed? All those abstaining? You abstaining or no?
Opposed.
Okay, so it passes 6-2. It did. All right, that's it for policies. Thank you. The next item is our monthly financial and staffing report. Why don't we do it this way? So do you want to make a motion to put that on the table? All right, Mr. Neal moves to accept the monthly financial and staffing report. I'll second that. Ms. O'Donnell.
Is there one?
It's not also.
Okay. Presenting the month ending report for September 25th, financial report for September 25th, 2019. There are some things that I would like to point out for this report. This is the first report for the fiscal year. And in addition to that, we are now required to include, sorry, just looking for the page. To include forecasts or quarterly projections in our report. So this is the first time we're doing that, and you'll see, I don't know what it is, the general fund financial report that you see a year-end forecast in there. Since we were only 25 days into the year with the most activity there, it does look like it's very close to budget, but we hope that as the forecasts continue throughout the year, that you'll start to see those sort of align with where we expect to end, to be at year end. Happy to take any questions.
All right, discussion?
I just wanted to note, unless I'm wrong, there's no transfers and no areas of concern.
That's correct.
So we should celebrate that.
Sure.
Right?
25 days.
Okay, exactly. And, exactly.
take it, I guess, where you can get it.
And as for the capital, that beautiful little bar chart that you do now, or pie chart, oh my God, pie chart that you do now, it's too late, exactly. Put me in the math program. There was no, this is new, right? So versus last year, there was no comp for this. So how does this compare to last year, if you can give me a sense?
I haven't looked at it as compared to last year in terms of percent complete.
Yeah, and construction, substantially complete.
I can tell you that just in terms of looking at the number of years we've been managing, trying to close that gap, we've made some great progress there. So, when I first started, we were looking at 4 or 5 years worth of projects. We're starting to narrow the gap. So now if you look at your percentages of balances available, really most significantly, you're looking at projects that are really in 18, 19, and 20. So that's, to me, I sort of expect to see capital projects open for at least a 3-year period, some of the most significant ones. So we're obviously looking to make sure that 14, 15, and 16 are closing down. So, and I can just tell you from, how I feel going through the process that we've been, making more of a concerted effort to get our projects closed out, and we're seeing that.
Yes, one more question. Also, on the added number of educators, professional assistants for preschool, I thought last year we had 12 sections, because now it's saying we added 12, 13, and 14 full-day preschool classrooms due to enrollment. I thought we only added 2 this year. Am I wrong?
We added 3 this year.
Because I'm looking at the report last year, it said we added a 12th, but
Last year, and we added 2 last year, and then 1 mid-year.
so that's the difference then, because we added one
We're
in.
back on 11 to start this year.
Okay, got it. All right, that makes more sense to me now. Thank you.
Ms. O'Neill.
Can any of the grant money be used for administrators or teachers to attend workshops, either for their travel or for their tuition? Or is this all the grant money student directed?
I'm gonna. It's grant specific, but for Title I and Title II, absolutely, and that's what we do. Title II more those.
Lori, I want to thank you. You actually did something we asked you to do for the open positions. You put the actual current status, not as of the date of the report, but as of what's actually happening now. That's really great. And I want to keep commending you on the capital and driving things to completion. I think one of the things that this teaches me is we basically previously we've asked for more money than we could actually spend in a given time period. I understand some things are going to go 1, 2, and 3 years, but the fact that some of these things were lingering out there for a really long time was a bit disturbing. So seeing it this way is a very helpful thing. Ms. Dayton.
Lori, this may be a sore subject, but I don't understand the assistant dean chart, GEA position adjustment on the staffing budget. There's zeros all the way across the chart, but then the narrative gives you another explanation.
So at this time, the activity that you'll see, so this section at the bottom you're referring to, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, so that's specifically providing detail for the GEA lines specifically. So what we're showing on the GEA line is that that we are 0.3 FTEs below the budgeted FTEs for that. And then the schedule at the bottom gives you the breakdown. So because there's only activity from July through September, you're only going to see data explaining what those sort of transactions were for that period. October through June is going to remain blank until we get to those, well, I guess like trimesters.
Okay, that's helpful.
Ms. Stout.
Okay, Lori, just tell me, please, this isn't your last meeting. Okay, good, so I don't have to start. I don't have to do a big goodbye yet. Okay, that's all I needed. Thank you.
This is slightly off topic, but it made me think of it. How did we do with our summer projects this year in terms of completing construction things, our summer work?
Summer's always busy. I don't have a percentage to tell you specifically, how we did, but our projects are, we're underway. And there's certainly other projects that we do have to either delay or kind of think about to occur more during the winter breaks and other breaks and things like that. But I think it's pretty consistent. I can get numbers if that's true.
It's just nice because we get a lot of questions, I think, from town bodies about are we able to get what we need to get done over the summer when we're asking for this. So just at some point, I think it'd be great to get some feedback on that so that we can have that available when we talk to people around town.
I will share that one of the challenges we have is really more specific to budgeting because when we're asking for funding based on an accrual basis. Yet the BET and town finance and the RTM are thinking more about this in terms of long-term, thinking about it more in terms of financing, so they're looking more for the cash. So when we ask for money, we really want to be cognizant to ask for the money that we need up front so that we can commit to work that may happen over the course of 2 or 3 years, because we obviously can't get everything done in the summer. And I think we just have to do a better job planning that way and maybe sort of getting that message out there, because I'm not so sure how clear that is to everybody, that capital budgeting, is really, most capital projects will last you more than 1 year. You just never know what kind of delays you're going to hit, and of course we're limited to those, 8 or 9 weeks in the summer.
And if you look at page, I think it's 12, starting on page 12 of the PDF, it looks like an eye chart because it's so tiny, but those are actually each individual budget items. And you can see the status of each, so it'll tell you what was what was done, so you can get a sense of, okay, this was a 20 budgeted item, where do we stand on that actual item? But it is a bit hard. The other thing is that it would be helpful to have the pages numbered, just thinking.
Yeah, sorry about that.
So I just want to thank you for, over the time you've been here, for making these budget report much more transparent. You've given us the information we've asked for, and I think that's really been helpful. And I did want to make a comment about the budget resolution, because I'm worried that that it says in there, the board shall send to the BET this, that, and the other thing. I want to make sure that the board sees it first before it goes to all those other bodies. And you've been really, really good at that. And I hope you engrave that in stone on your desk so that the next person will know that things have to come to the board before they go elsewhere.
I'll leave that note in my.
But you've done a great job. Thank you.
You're welcome. I will, that's the other item I meant to mention is that you'll now see the Medicaid receipts on the revenue report. I forgot to mention that earlier. Couldn't think of what the other item was.
Do us another favor, don't do us a Jim Ricky, don't throw out all the files, please.
I'm sure she's already working on her transition memo, because that's what we expect. All right, any other discussion on this item? So the motion is to accept this report. All those in favor? All those opposed? Oh, 8-0. Hey, what do you know? All right, and we are at the agenda planning portion. So Cardinal Stadium will be on there for November. It is the science report. We've added ALP science discussion. Also the science curriculum that evening, because that has not been presented to the board previously. Mr. Sheriff.
I'd like to suggest we add an item in anticipation of the decision that the board authorize a building committee. As you know, building committees are normally required by the state, but we may not be seeking reimbursement for this project. It would mean normally the first selectman and others would appoint that, but in this case, we need a building style committee, but in this case, it would be appointed by us, because it would not be done, it's not tied to a state reimbursement. So I don't know whether we want to call it a building committee, a building style committee, or whatever, but we have to authorize whether, particularly under our new policies regarding committees that I was reading the other day, the board has to even authorize whether or not there would be one. And then the second part would be, ultimately, the board has to approve a slate of who those people would be that are on that committee. I think we need to take at minimum, we won't be able to take the second step. We need to take the first step, which is to say, as a board, we're creating this committee for this project.
So just the one, it can come under the cardinal plan action item, right? Completely legitimate motion to make at that time. I would caution, though, on trying to make it a committee of the board. It may be direct the superintendent to appoint a committee with the following types of members, come back to the board, have us approve it, but not a committee of the board. Because if it's a committee of the board, having now served on a building committee, you don't want to be managing that project. So it's not a question of
managing it. I think the problem is, which is what's happened with this project, is we had kind of a committee, it wasn't, the board didn't really pick the people who went on to this committee, and I think the board needs to have some level of oversight of what's the composition of the people who are on the board, and then I'd like the board to have some say about making sure that the right stakeholders are there. I think the committee that we have right now, I'll say it veered off into certain people with very strong opinions. They were running around town lobbying in the name of the Board of Education, and it went off into a really weird direction. So I think we have to learn from that experience. I have no problem if the superintendent is proposing what the committee is, but I think the board has to we have to be sure we've got the right people and everybody's on side. The worst scenario is that we have a committee and the board is not fully backing up that committee. Because if the board's not fully backing up that committee, that to me is a bad place to be. It leads to some not great things. So I have no problem if the superintendent wants to take the task administratively of with capital, with Ralph, with others, suggesting we ought to be on that. First thing the board's got to do is say whether or not we'll have one. And the second part, I think, is when it gets around to it, I can live with, if Tony wants to recommend it, sure, great. The board doesn't need to take up the task of picking the people. But I think at the same time, we have to take action so we fully back up that committee.
I will say the existing Cardinal Stadium Committee is advisory to the superintendent. A previous superintendent from before Tony was here, before I was chair, set that up. So I don't know where the membership came from. That was not anything we had any history with, and I think, Lauren, you had served on it at one point in time as well. The Cardinal Stadium Committee. But I don't really remember the history of how that got set up, but it was a advisory to the superintendent only.
Yeah.
I would say though, Peter, this is a capital project like our other capital projects. It would be managed by our facilities director. That's how our capital projects are structured. You are correct. Building committees are a specific entity. It's under the state, it's under our charter, our town charter dictates the membership of the building committee. I would suggest the superintendent read that for direction in terms of the types of people she may want access to. But I gotta tell you, I would caution against it being a committee of the board. I would love her to have access to the professionals she needs. That's been part of the success of the New Lebanon project, is having building and construction professionals, lawyers who actually understand contracts. It has been the right team of people at the right place. So that may be a template for what she should look at. But ultimately, it is a project that the district runs, not the board.
Peter, I agree with you 100%. That's why it ought to be a building type committee. The committee we have now that was running this project, there's almost no one on that advisory committee with any of the skills that you just described. That committee was assembled by the administration. I believe the board was involved in that, either the chair or the vice chair, however that happened. But anyway, the point of it is it's the committee. You sit on the committee as an example, an RTM member sits on the committee, a BET member sits on the committee. But let me tell you what, there's no one on that board with construction experience, design experience. And by the way, here's the other part, since we've taken this issue up. The other point of it is it's got a lot of Greenwich Public Schools staff on it, which means they need to be running schools. They need to not be sitting on committees to build building and look at designs.
Actually, that wasn't the job of the committee, Peter. The job of the committee, as I understood it, again, somebody else was the chair before me. You were before me, there were other people before me. Whoever came before me may have had a hand in setting it up, I don't know. That committee was about establishing what are the things we are trying to accomplish, how can we do that? It came to the board gave direction to the architect, who developed various plans. We picked one as a board. He came with 3 plans, we picked one of them. Dr. Francis.
So it looks like that's something that might come up, and as you said, can go under that item when it comes up, and then we can discuss it at that time when it's on our agenda.
All right, anything else? Dr. Francis, you have a question? Yes.
Sorry, am I on?
Yep.
February, am I right that February, well, it says 2019 on the January, we have to fix that, I think, but February 20th is the next time we're going to address special ed, is that correct? Because it's what I would consider special ed crisis right now. I think something needs to be addressed before that program report. February 20th, is there a way to?
100%.
Okay, well, I think one of the things we were looking for from Dr. Jones was when UConn was going to be ready, and I was hoping they'd be ready before that date. So I'm going to pencil that onto our agenda plan, and I think we need to get that as a first step. Thank you for reminding us. All right, if there's nothing else, Dr. Francis? I'll second that motion. Anybody object? No? Unanimous? All right, thank you, everyone. We are your turn.